Okay, are we about ready to start?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The July 16, 2020 meeting of the Yarmouth Conservation Commission is about to be convened. As a precautionary measure to reduce the spread of coronavirus, all town buildings are closed to the public. Therefore, this meeting will be held by remote participation. My name is Kelly Grant, and I will be moderating participation for this meeting. I will now turn it over to the chair of the meeting.
All right, I'll call for a quorum. David Bernstein is here. David?
Must be on mute.
David, can you hear us? All right, we're not getting you, okay? We'll say you're present. All right, next is Rick Bishop.
Present.
Tom Durkin. Is Tom here?
He's muted.
Okay, I see him here. We'll say yes. Ed Hoops is present. Paul Huggins.
Present.
Ellie Lawrence.
Here.
And Patricia Mulhern.
Here.
All right, we have a full board. I'll turn it back to Kelly.
Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the governor's March 23, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Yarmouth Conservation Commission is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access and participate in the proceedings as provided for in the order. Persons who would like to view this meeting while in progress may do so by watching via this virtual meeting or the live feed on the Town of Yarmouth YouTube channel. You may also listen to the meeting by dialing into the number provided on the meeting notice. Please be patient as we work to overcome any technological challenges with the virtual meeting. To reduce confusion during the meeting, all participants will be muted by the moderator. As participants are called upon to speak, they will be unmuted. Applicants can use the, use the raise hand button or press *9 on their phone to identify themselves to the chair. The meeting host will then unmute applicants when they are called upon to speak. During the portion of the meeting designated for public comment, the chair or moderator will ask who in the audience has any public comments or questions. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be able to make comments using the raise hand button within the virtual meeting. If you are dialed into the phone number provided, you can press *9 on your phone to indicate that you would like to comment. Please wait for the chairman to recognize you before speaking. Members of the public who wish to provide comment are asked to identify themselves by first and last name and affiliation for the public record and then provide their comment. Prior to concluding opportunities for discussion, comment, or question, the chair will ask a final time if anyone wishes to speak on the matter. All votes must be roll call votes. After a motion is made and there is a second, the chair will ask the moderator to take and report the roll call vote. All motions, decisions, documents, and letters will be verbally read into the record. If it appears the meeting cannot or should not proceed, then the moderator will recommend that the chair request to continue the hearing to a later date and time and/or until public meetings can resume normally. I will now hand the meeting back to the chair.
All right, thank you, Kelly. So we will get right into it. Before we get into everything, though, I will ask everybody, today is an extremely heavy agenda with lots of notices. So I'm going to ask that you try and keep your points your comments very on point. Try and be as succinct as possible so we can all get out of here before midnight, hopefully. With that said, I will go to the first item, which is a request for determination of applicability. It's continued hearing from July 2nd, 2020 for Aunt Edith's Neighborhood Association on Edith's Road, South Yarmouth, replacement in kind of 10 12-inch pilings associated with a licensed pier in Bass River. I think Dan is here for that. With the commission, before we start with this one though, just so Dan is aware, as well as they received the revision, and there are still a few differences, I think. We only received the revision yesterday, I believe it was. So I would suggest that instead of trying to look at this on a little computer screen, that we actually continue this to next meeting. So we all have the chance to look at the hard copy that will be in our files for next meeting. But that's just my opinion. If the commission wants to hear it, I will gladly go ahead with that as well. So I'll say the commissioners.
Bishop, I would like to continue this. We have precedent for this in the past, things arriving within one day.
I agree.
I
Else,
agree.
Pat, Tom,
I agree.
Paul, you're good. Tom, David. Okay, Dan. David, we still don't have you. Okay. All right. We'll just hold up a note card. All right, Dan, you understand? We'll just go ahead and continue this then to Kelly. What is the date for that one?
I think it's August 6th.
Okay, so do I have a,
Yeah, he's just muted at the moment.
okay, do I have a motion to continue this item until August 6th, 2020?
So moved.
Tom, thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Pat.
Pat, thank you. Kelly, would you call the roll, please?
Bishop,
Aye.
Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein. I hear a thumbs up, so I'm taking that as an aye.
You
Laura?
saying okay?
Lawrence? Ellie's a good thumbs up as well. Hoops? Hoops?
Aye.
Huggins?
Aye.
Mulhern?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Continue to August 6th.
All right. Thank you, Kelly.
And David, if you want to use the chat function, I can see that. So if you have any questions or comments, then I can read those out from the chat function if you're not able to resolve the.
All right. Next order of business, we're moving on to notices of intent. The first notice of intent is Kevin Cooper, 17 and 19 Eldridge Road, Yarmouth, Massachusetts, proposed raising an existing dwelling, construction of new flood zone compliant dwelling and Title V septic system within land subject to coastal storm flowage. And I believe this is Dan as well, I think, right?
That's correct. I have unmuted him, but I see Danny Gonzalez. I'll just allow him to talk. Okay, so he should be able to.
Okay, yes, Danny Gonzalez and Dan Ojala are here. So we should be able to help out with this one. And I apologize on that, this COVID is killing us, and I was training a new guy. So I wasn't able to get that plan in like I was sure I was going to, but I think it's a pretty straightforward matter, and nothing's going to get done in the next couple of weeks anyway. So we'll take our time on that and get it right. So this one is a pretty straightforward raise and replace. It is subject to coastal storm flowage only. So what we call a flood zone only project. Per some of the experiences recently with water flowing onto neighbors, we paid special attention on this one, on the redevelopment, to make the situation better as proposed than what's existing now, which is generally the standard of care. You don't want to introduce new storm flowage to abutting properties. So while we do have to raise it up a little bit and get everything up safely above the flood elevation, you can see we perform nice grass line swales and dry wells, roof dry wells to infiltrate all the runoff, and sheeted it safely out to this a little bit in the street. But generally it's going to be a lot better condition instead of the paved drive and so forth. It's going to be I believe a pervious driveway on this one. We've got the dry wells, the grass line swales, and fully FEMA compliant foundation system design. So much better for the environment than if floodwaters were allowed to enter, and perhaps flood out gas cans and everything else that would be stored below that flood elevation. So pretty routine, no real wetlands, just coastal storm flowage of just a very small amount of fill. But again, we are looking at upgraded septic, which you need a little bit of height over. And to mitigate that, we've created very careful grassland swales to infiltrate the water to low points on site, and taken all the roof runoff and put it in dry wells. So we'll be glad to answer any questions that you have on this one.
Okay, thanks, Dan. I'll send it off to the commission. Anybody have any questions, comments? I'm not seeing anything from anybody on the commission. No?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Ellie.
Okay, it wasn't working before. We do have a Daniel Gonzalez with his hand up, but I have no questions on this if they address the possible runoff issue in the downspouts and the dry wells.
All right, anybody else?
This is Pat. It's noted that they're going to clear the vegetation, all the vegetation on the lot. And maybe they would, it would be good to replant around the perimeter to help with any runoff. Require replanting around the perimeter of the property.
This is Dan from Down Cape. So, plantings can help a little, not much more than loam and seed will, but, I think, a requirement that it be vegetated rather than mulched would be fine if the board prefers. The pitch of the land will be such that the, all the water will sheet to lower areas on the site. So I don't anticipate much trouble, but so that sounds like a reasonable condition. We certainly wouldn't want to leave it hard packed dirt, and that wouldn't be building code anyway.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Dan. Anybody else from the commission who has any comments, concerns about this? All right, seeing none, I'm going to go over to the audience. Anybody in the audience, if you would like to comment on this this project, please raise your hand electronically.
I don't see any raised hands.
I'm not seeing anybody. Last chance for the audience participation. Anybody have any comments on this? Raise your hand. No? All right, then I will go back to the commission. Sorry, Kelly, do you have any comments?
I just had a question with regard to the runoff in the top corner of the lot there. Is the runoff being directed to the catch basins in the road at that point?
Hi, Kelly. Sure. Dan from Down Cape Engineering. Yes, that's generally accurate, but don't forget, we've got a pervious driveway, so there's very little runoff, but that is pitched towards the road. And the sideline there is basically just a grass swale, which will absorb its own water. But to the extent that during a big event, you don't want to run it to the neighbor, but running it to the street is generally allowed because, the roads are designed to take a little bit of runoff from all the lots that are adjacent them. So there is just a small amount that's sheeting out, safely onto the public way where those existing catch basins are, and the existing paved drive does pitch out there now. So by the time you pull up that asphalt for the paved drive and replace it with lawn, I think net, it would probably not be an increase off of this lot. But there is a tiny bit that would be directed there, but less than existing, I would argue.
Okay. So we don't have a file number for this project yet. Have you seen anything yet, Dan, from DEP?
No, I haven't seen one come through. I didn't double check today though.
No, I haven't seen anything up till now. So another question I had was, is there, I don't see a work limit line. I know typically that's used when we have a wetland to protect, but I think it also helps with protecting the neighboring properties from sediment runoff during construction. So if you could look at putting a sediment control line around the perimeter of the property. And we're also losing quite a lot of vegetation through the development of the lots, and there's a lot of trees on the property that are going to be lost. So I would certainly agree with Commissioner Mulhern's comment about doing some replanting around the perimeter of the property to replace some of the trees that are being lost. Perhaps a number of trees could be specified that would need to be replaced somewhere in the on the property post-construction. That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Kelly. Dan, you're good with that then, right?
Yeah, trees, everybody likes trees. I just, we don't want to burden the owner with having a gigantic landscape bill though. So if you could leave it to the discretion, some native species, but, perhaps not, instant, 20-foot high trees. If we could be just allowed to put smaller trees, which, tend to naturalize better and do better. So either be silent on it and let them, select, appropriate 1.5-inch caliper or something that is reasonable, maybe some evergreens, but, not burden them with a, $60,000 landscape bill, because it's a little bit unusual, but, I do realize, well, and again, the performance standards being, just, don't direct flow to your neighbor. It's the berms will do that. We certainly don't have a problem with some modest vegetation, but I just ask us not to write something that's going to break the bank. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's agreeable. Kelly, are you okay with that?
Yep, that sounds fine.
Okay, Pat, yes?
Yep.
Okay. Any further discussion among? All right, so then could I get a motion to continue this? And we will not be taking any further comment at that August 6th. It's solely for waiting for the DEP file number assignment. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved, Bishop.
Thank you, Bishop.
Second, Ellie.
Lawrence seconded. Kelly, call the roll, please.
Bishop,
Aye.
Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein. Aye, okay. Lawrence,
Aye.
Hoops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Aye.
The motion carries 7-0 to continue for the issuance of the order until August 6th.
All right, thank you, Kelly. Next order of business is another continued notice of intent. This is continued from June 4th, 2020 for SE 83-2232, Christopher Haley, 190 Blue Rock Road, South Yarmouth, a proposed reconfiguration of dock within Bass River.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, that's we've got you there.
Mark Burgess with Shorefront Consulting, for the record, representing the Haley project again. So just briefly, we had only continued this because we had filed it to inform the commission of the new configuration that was proposed, eliminating an extra float that was unlicensed, etc. And we were waiting for Waterways approval. So this and several of the other upcoming projects went through Waterways, and it was approved on June 17th. So we're back in front of you to get this finally approved, and with a condition that the corrective action work, they're extending the pier 21 feet, chopping off the float, things like that. All of the proposed work should be completed. We're suggesting before April 1st of next year. As you recall, this was under a violation. And that's about it, folks. I'll stop talking now.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Yep.
Commissioners?
I have no problem with this. It moves it back away from the community dock that's to the south of it and gets rid of the extra float, brings it out into deeper water and, well, maybe not deeper water, but just, and it's shorter than where it's licensed. So I have no problem with this.
All right, thank you, Ellie. Anybody else? Kelly, any further comments on that?
And the only condition I would suggest is that the work be completed by the beginning of the 21 boating season. This was a response to a violation, so it'd be good to get it resolved. Suggest maybe a date of April 1st, 2021.
Yep. We're in agreement to that, certainly.
Okay, just so everybody knows, I am having some connectivity problems here, so and every once in a while the audio is going out on me, so I'm not hearing exactly 100% what everybody's saying. So if I say something again or something contraindicatory from what was said, somebody stop me. So anyhow, I think everybody said you're agreeing to the corrective action be completed before April 1st, 2021. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, great, thanks. Is there anybody in the audience who has any comments or concerns with this?
I don't see any hands
Your
raised.
little hand up, no? Okay. Again, amongst the commission, back to the commission, any last comments? If not, would somebody like to make a motion?
So moved.
I second
David.
it. Lawrence.
So David made it, Ellie Lawrence seconded. Kelly, would you call the roll, please?
Sorry, could we just include in the motion just to allow me to apply any special conditions? Because otherwise there's no accommodation for that.
Okay, David, will you agree to that?
Yes.
All right, and Ellie?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's so amended.
Bishop,
Aye.
Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Hoops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Approve the order of conditions.
Next order of business is another notice of intent for Alice and Peter Joslow, 11 Prince Road, Yarmouth, Massachusetts, a proposed boat lift for existing permitted and licensed pier in Mill Pond, West Yarmouth. All right,
Yes.
All right, Mark, go ahead.
Yes, for the record, Mark Burgess, Shorefront Consulting, representing the Joslows again. Well, not again, sorry, just me again. Okay, so this was, it was a dock that was permitted in 1996, and it was originally permitted. It extended 80 feet beyond mean high water, and it was permitted to have an outhaul pile where a boat presumably would be moored to the pile. Unfortunately, it left no way to get from the pier to the boat. So the Joslows, in an attempt to solve that problem, installed a ramp and float without a permit, which was promptly removed upon notification, and the result of the analysis of options available to make this dock function. The result of that analysis is in front of you. So briefly, the alternatives analysis that was included with the notice of intent went through several options, including the ramp and float. And I just felt that this was the best way to solve the problem of access, keep it safe, and keep as much of anything new off the bottom as possible. It passed waterways as well. And we practically got a standing ovation from Division of Marine Fisheries. There is a shellfish survey that was conducted, and basically anything seaward of mean low water is almost dead. So there's not a lot of shellfish issue, but again, we don't want to bottom out the boat. The applicant is well aware that the boat lift can only be used during higher tides. And I know you guys are familiar with the boat lift. So this seemed like the best available option to add on to the end of the dock. It doesn't have to be connected to the dock. The only addition I'd like to make is we noticed on the neighboring project that they included a platform within the boat lift itself. So the boat lift is a fixed dimension. I think it's 14 by 16 or something like that. They only have a 17-foot boat, so it's quite narrow, maybe a 6 or 7 foot beam. So there's another 7 feet of the lift that's left over, and approximately 3.5 feet on either side. So rather than have them jump from the dock to the boat, because the boat has to be in the middle, we'd like to add a small platform 3 to 4 feet wide on the boat lift itself, so that they can stand on that to get into the boat, which is in the middle of the lift. Obviously, that's not shown in the plan, and I could certainly revise the plan in short order, and you could hold the order of conditions hostage until I get you that revised plan. So with that, I guess I'll address questions.
All right, Commission.
I'm trying to visualize this, because on the plans it has the pilings for the lift a little inward of the end of the dock, and if you put a platform on there, it would be going up and down along those pilings there, or over the pilings.
Yeah, I guess looking at it from a drafting standpoint, I didn't center the boat. I probably should, because that will equally place the load on the 4 pilings. So that's a drafting error. And again, if you need me to revise the plan to add that small platform, I can do that and move the boat toward the middle, no problem.
So the platform itself will be outside those outer pilings?
Yes.
Okay.
The outer pilings of the dock.
Right. Correct.
And
okay.
It'll actually be mounted to the framework of the lift.
Okay.
And go up and down, and it'll go up and down with the lift.
With the lift, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
That's all I have at this point.
Anything else from the Commission?
Rick has his hand raised.
Okay, Rick.
Mr. Burgess, I'm a little confused because it seems to me that an outhaul system to that existing piling, when used in reverse, becomes a in-haul system, and that's the fundamental part of the design, is to be able to move the boat in and out away from the dock. Thus, I'm kind of shaking my head at this application because they just don't want to do that. They want to have another system, and I respect that. But to use that as their excuse is fundamentally kind of funny to me. But I'm just concerned. This is, as far as I know, this is probably the 4th or 5th system like this in our waters, and we're just getting closer and closer to Fort Lauderdale, and it's unfortunate in my opinion. That's all.
All right, thank you, Rick. Anybody else in the Commission? If not, Kelly, do you have any comments?
Yeah, so we have a file number. Waterways supported the project. DMF supported the project. I did have some potential conditions that should be included, which we included with the other boat lift project. And that included automatic stops to be set above the bottom with an automatic return to the top position. That the hoist shall be for recreational use only and be the only permanent boat hoist on the property. That the boat hoist shall allow for free flow of water and shall not interfere with navigation or use of the water body by others. It shall not have any permanent covers, roof, or sides. There should be no floats associated with the structure. and that a construction barge, if used, should be moved out of the area prior to low tide to avoid it bottoming out. And with regard to the platform, I think maybe 4 feet's probably a little wide, wider than is needed. So if I'd say maybe 2 to 3 feet wide would probably be sufficient for the walkway, and that would be a graded platform. And yeah, I'd like to just see an updated plan that reflects the changes so that we have that on file. That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Kelly. Mark, you're agreeable to that?
Yes, no problem. To address Mr. Bishop's question just quickly, the whole thing I understand that the pile is used like a haul-out mooring, but that assumes you can get to it. Normally, a haul-out mooring is used when you're like standing on the shoreline. So the point is that they just, without climbing down a ladder at the end of the dock, they have no way to get to that area. So that when they pull the boat in, they can't get to the boat. That's all. So I appreciate what you're saying, Rick. This just seemed like the best way to solve the issue.
All right, is there anybody in the audience who has any comments or concerns with this project?
I don't see any hands raised in the audience.
All right, last chance amongst the audience. If not, okay, I'm going to go back. One last chance for the commissioners. Any final comments? And if not, would somebody like to make a motion? We're looking to make the motion where we are approving, depending on a revised plan that shows a platform. Do we say a 3-foot platform? Is that what we were talking about?
2 to 3.
2 to 3 foot platform with the additional special conditions that were listed by Kelly. And so we would continue this then until we get the receipt of the revised plan.
You want to continue until the plan comes in?
Yeah, I don't think we should issue it until we get the revised plan. I'm fine with going ahead and giving the order. I don't think we should issue it until we receive the revised plan. So.
Correct. We've always accepted what I call holding the plan hostage until, and holding the order hostage until you get the plan. Absolutely, right. No problem. Yep.
So you'll accept a motion now, Ed?
Yeah. Go ahead, Tom, if you'd like to make that motion.
So moved with the special 4 conditions, 5 conditions that Kelly has stipulated.
All right, thank you, Tom. Is there a second?
I second that with the other condition that she asked for the planking to be graded.
Yes.
All right, and Tom, will you accept that?
Yes,
will you add that?
certainly.
Okay. Thank you, Ellie. Kelly, would you call the roll, please?
Clarify that the planking being graded, that's for the platform, right? That's being added.
That's correct.
Okay, and sorry, can I also just clarify? I think I missed that. So we are making, the motion is to issue the order of conditions pending the receipt of the updated plan?
That's right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Bishop?
Aye.
Durkin?
Aye.
Bernstein?
Aye.
Lawrence?
Aye.
Oops.
Aye.
Huggins?
Aye.
Mulhern?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
Mr. Burgess, thank you for specifying the materials as you did.
All right, thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kelly. Moving on to our next order of business is another notice of intent for Robert and Barbara Troop, 20 River Drive, Yarmouth, Massachusetts. Proposed access stairs, bulkhead, and fiber rolls on the coastal bank to Bass River.
Yes, hello, Mark Burgess again, representing the troops. I hope a lot of you were able to make it out to the site. And so there's some elements to this, and some cleanup of an old order of conditions. So first I'll talk about the project Basically, it's a standard set of beach access stairs. There's nothing strange or funny going on there. The topography of the site is such that there's an elevated area over on the south side of the property that we want the stairs to land on, because the rest of the property is lower and it goes right onto the marsh. Many years ago in the 60s, there was a set of timber access stairs that have now just become one with the bank, and they're unusable. So again, there was a pretty extensive alternatives analysis that was given with and I won't go through it all now, but you'll see why we ended up where we did. So the access stairs are not a huge issue. We were asked to see if we could move them north to allow the lower area where they were going to land. If Kelly can go back to that first picture that shows the landing, yeah, right there. So where the ribbons are is where the landing is, and it's staked out according to the plan, but I think when we did the survey, that area was overgrown. So that little shelf that's there wasn't really visible to the surveyor. So we have an opportunity to move the landing further away from that picture toward the north. The applicant went down to measure it about a half an hour ago. We can move it at least 6 feet. That pushes it towards the beginning of the fiber rolls and uses up the corner area that's there and allows more of the other area that's been opened up to revegetate. So understanding that lower area was cleared to provide an access for now, when the project is completed, the stairs will be put in. The stairs turn sideways so that they land on this platform. I looked into putting the stairs straight down, but they land right about where the debris is and where the fiber rolls would be. So it didn't seem practical to me to have them land there. So the stairs come off at a right angle. They can store their kayaks off of the landing, and we would just make a minimum 4 to 6 foot wide path from where the stairs land through what is now that Rosa rugosa, and the rest of the area would be allowed to naturalize. If you went down there, you saw a path from the abutting stairs through that vegetation. That would all be allowed to naturalize. So that's about it for the stairs. Looking at the same picture, where the timber and the cinder blocks and the debris is exactly where we want to put the fiber rolls. So obviously that debris is removed, and we have 2 rows of fiber rolls to protect the edge of that berm. Also, if they were going to drag a kayak over it, the fiber roll would protect that edge from erosion as well. So that's what the stakes represent, is 30 feet of fiber rolls along that edge, and all that debris gets removed. The Rosa rugosa should be able to stay unless we have to cut a path through it, and then we can plant additional down there too to help things speed up the renaturalization process. Okay, so that's it for the stairs and the fiber roll. Now, the bulkhead, after really an exhaustive search of options, which is why I came to the conclusion that a low bulkhead was the right choice for this project with this topography. Greg Berman, as you know, looked at the site, and basically, without saying it, paraphrasing it, he was saying that the bulkhead is a viable option because fiber rolls at the base of this bank aren't going to work. Fiber rolls still cut off sediment source if they're successful, the same as a bulkhead would. So the idea of having a low bulkhead was to provide tow protection to a coastal bank that actually has 2 functions. So it's providing flood control and storm damage protection to a pre-1978 property, but it's also has the opportunity to provide a sediment source to the beach. So that's why I didn't want, like a 10 or 12 foot high bulkhead. That's excessive, and it cuts off one of the functions of the coastal bank. So the low bulkhead, it's not an overwash, it's only 3 foot exposed, but it gives us the tow protection in the least amount of space possible, so we don't have to disturb the marsh that's in front of it. What Kelly and I talked about was having a trigger point saying that the bulkhead is installed 3 foot exposed. And if in such case that the sediment, the exposure was 3.5 feet, then we need to evaluate the area to see why the beach dropped. If it needs to be nourished, we could nourish it. If it's just the inevitable decline of the marsh, then maybe there's nothing you can do, but at least we could have the opportunity to put a trigger point in there and have the opportunity to review the site, you know, a couple of years from now and see what's going on. Let's see. The wall is cantilevered, so it doesn't need any anchors. It would be backfilled to shore up the toe of the slope. And then in almost any storm surge condition, the bulkhead would be overwashed. And of course, in a major storm, the bank would be allowed to provide sediment to the system. What else did I see here? So we want to move the landing. The landing can go over at least 6 feet north from where it is now, at least. And it might be more. I'll confirm that before I revise the plan. So we will probably going to be continuing. Well, we'll see what you guys decide. We also talked about the lower landing is 4 feet by 5 feet. And I, for the life of me, can't remember why I did it at 5 feet. So that might have been because of the contour that's shown on the plan. But when we look at the site conditions, now that that area is viewable, I can make the landing 4 feet wide, the lower landing. So that will move it 1 foot landward. So we talked about a trigger point. Oh, and Greg Berman suggested on site and somewhat in his report that it's actually beneficial for the bulkhead to be extended under the stairs, just to the south side of the stairs. And that way the fiber rolls will overlap and protect the berm in front of it. But this way they won't be chasing erosion under the stairs if it occurs. He mentioned what's happening next door. So we're amenable to all of that. And we can stop there if you want. And then there's an open order of conditions that Kelly found that I didn't realize, honestly. It was recorded under Lee Troop and not Robert. And when I looked at this project in 2017, your database wasn't in existence then. So my bad for the registry not giving that information up. So we do have to deal with an old order, but we have a game plan. So for the moment, I guess I'm going to say, let's turn it over and we'll talk about this project and then we can move on to the old order. Okay.
All right, thank you, Mark. Yeah, let's keep the old order. Keep that completely separate, and we'll handle that at a future hearing. Commissioners, any questions for this project? Anybody? No?
Well, there seems to be an area that was cleared that wasn't a while ago, and I think we need to address that too, because that obviously was not cleared before, and it's in the BVW.
Correct. That's why we're proposing, if we can move the landing 6 feet to the north, that'll decrease the area on the north side of it and increase the amount of area that can be allowed to naturalize or replant on the south. And we only ask that we leave like a 4 to 6 foot wide path at the bottom of the steps through what is now that thin band of Rosa rugosa, and everything else gets either planted or allowed to naturalize. I'm guessing it'll grow back pretty quick.
Mark, why is it denuded?
The applicants, I guess, were looking for a way to get to the water as a temporary measure, and they made a little landing down there.
Okay.
This was between the time that, well, many years ago, and Ellie might remember this, we went before Waterways because they wanted a dock, and that was like in 2017. That did not receive Waterway support, so the project was idle. but it included a set of access stairs at the time. So now, a couple of years later, the troops that decided to reactivate the access step portion, and then the erosion at the base of the bank had gotten worse, so they asked me to look into that. So that's why the project is before you now. And in between then and now, they had done the clearing, and of course, when I saw it, as I said to Kelly on site, I scolded the applicant for doing that and said, you know, we're going to have to deal with that. So they are proposing to restore that area.
Okay, so so what I would suggest then is we just keep that as a separate issue. You know, whether we do a full enforcement track or however we want to deal with that, but we should keep that separate from this hearing tonight then.
Well, that Ed, if I may, that's not part of the old order. That's not the areas that we're talking about from the old order. But why wouldn't we make a corrective action part of this proposal? I mean, we're proposing it.
Do you have something proposed to propose for that spot, or you're just saying you're letting it revegetate?
That would be up to the commission. We're certainly open to providing a planting plan. It would consist of more of whatever is down there. So there's some Rosa rugosa. It wouldn't include the bittersweet, sorry, but there's some Rosa rugosa. There's, we were trying to, myself and Kelly and Greg Berman were trying to identify some of the other greenery that's down there. We couldn't immediately identify it, but yes, so whatever's down there, they could plant more of it. You could wait a little while and see how much of it starts to come back on its own. A lot of times in these areas, once you leave it alone, it springs back to life. So we're open to either of those solutions, but I think it's prudent to put it as part of this order because we've already got work to do.
All right. Well, I'm going to I'm going to hand it over to the other commissioners if anybody else has any comments on that. But anybody else?
I think we should put that as part of the order because that's the general area where the stairs are going to be. So we might as well just put that in there.
Okay, I see. I mean, I think now that you're saying it makes sense that the area is going to be impacted either way. So, all right, I'm fine with that. Anybody else on any comments?
This is Pat. I'm under the impression we're landing in a new spot, 6 feet in a different direction.
Correct. If that picture that shows the staking, the 4 flags, Kelly's going to it there, that one there. So as you're looking from where the picture was taken and looking at those 4 flags, they would go to like the 2 o'clock position where she's pointing to fit closer into that V and just get it as close to that corner as you can. And that distance is at least another 6 feet. And that allows more of the cleared area to naturalize. Does that help?
Yeah. Yes.
This is David. I have a question.
Go ahead.
So if you do that, are the stairs still coming down straight, or are they being moved up towards the top also? How is that looking?
The entire staircase would move the 6 feet.
Okay, so it would be straight from 6 feet from that squared green area, all the way straight up.
Yep, the same. It would look the same from the bird's eye view, except it's just going to be slid over 6 feet.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else? Kelly, any other comments?
I'll just run through my comments. So you're all aware of the requirements with regard to an engineering structure on a coastal bank. The house is pre-1978. I confirmed that. So they are allowed CES if they can meet the criteria. One of the requirements is that they look at other alternatives. And I guess one of the alternatives is that they don't do anything and just have a monitoring for as the bank further erodes, then look at whether a CES is necessary. So that's another option that could be looked at. Having said that, this is a low wall, so under storm conditions, it will still allow the bank to act as a sediment source. So the overall impacts appear to be minimal, especially based on Greg's report. I think the area that's been cleared at the bottom of the bank should be addressed through this order. Not with Rosa rugosa, but with native plantings that are suited to these growing conditions. Most of what's there appears to be invasive, so obviously that's going to be a problem continuing forward. I did express some concern with the egress from the landing and the stairs going into that cleared area, and that it would mean that that area continued to be cleared just through foot traffic, but moving it over into that V, I think, is a good solution, and also reducing the width of that platform, and really just allowing only an access pathway from the bottom of those stairs around to access the water, and the rest of that whole area should be revegetated. And so that should definitely be shown on the plan, and the planting plan for what's going to go in that location. I see some benefit for requiring an assessment of the wall periodically, maybe on an annual basis, just to see how much of the wall is exposed. And if it reaches, say 3.5 feet, that we should look at requiring some nourishment along the immediate bottom of that, the wall, to replace the sediment that's been lost. The old order, I think, should be closed out before any work begins on this project. It is the order was for the I think the reconstruction of the house, and there were mitigation plantings required as a part of that, which were not completed. So I think that we should certainly include a condition that that old order be resolved and closed out before any work begin on this project, so that we don't have that outstanding. And I think that is all that I have.
All right.
So Kelly, what you're saying is that because of the coastal bank, one option we have would be to just watch the set distance of erosion going towards the house before it gets to the point where it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah, so the idea of the CES is that it's allowed for the protection of a structure that's under threat, and at this point you could deem that that structure is not under threat. So you could require that it come back at a later date if the structure is indeed under threat, and then permit the bulkhead then, or you could permit it now with a trigger that once the bank erodes to a certain point, they could then put in a wall. There's just other options like that, or you could just go ahead and permit it now, and that will just maintain the bank at where it is at the moment.
Well, I'm a little concerned about the sediment if it does start scouring away, because you have the Georgetown flats in there, and how much is that going to end up? Are we going to have another case like Lewis Bay and the salt boxes and all that, where we're just going to keep dumping the sand into the system?
Well, the idea though is that we don't put a CES there because we want the bank to be able to erode, because it's feeding the beach and building up the beach to maintain the salt marsh and feed the surrounding beaches. So not really looking at it in terms of sediment infilling the water body. So that's kind of the logic with the CES, and the requirements for that is that they want it to be a sediment source if it is a sediment source. So by doing this project, you're kind of cutting off that sediment source. So it's kind of the opposite.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can I speak to that?
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. So Kelly and I were talking about this earlier, and I'm going to use the analogy of the knee bones connected to the ankle bone. The short bulkhead is being used to protect the toe of the bank only. And as I said, it still can be a sediment source at higher tides. So the toe protection, which could be in the form of a fiber roll, which would be completely approvable, but that still cuts the sediment source off. It just takes up more room, and we didn't want to dig behind the marsh if we didn't have to. So the bulkhead allows you to just push the sheets in with either a tripod mounted vibrator or something like that, because the sheets are only 6 or 8 feet long, I think. So when you look at it in that principle, we could always do fiber rolls. I don't think anybody would care about that because it's not a CES, but it does the same thing that the low bulkhead does. It's just that the fiber rolls in this case would be a waste of time and money, and maintaining them means just disturbing the area all over again. So we're protecting the toe of the bank. The toe of the bank is because the toe of the bank is protected, then the bank is fairly well stabilized, but it still could erode significantly in a large storm. But the bank is providing storm damage protection to the property, which of course is all about the house too. The regulations, it's subject to how you guys want to interpret them. The state regulations say that, yeah, if it's a pre-78 house, you can put a coastal engineered structure if the house is in jeopardy, but there's no determination as to when the house is in jeopardy. And I say that because, for instance, Wellfleet designed in their regs, they said, okay, if it's a pre-78 house, you can put a revetment or a bulkhead in, but they added language in their bylaws that says it has to be within 40 feet of the foundation or 20 years of erosion based on a calculated erosion rate. Well, we don't have that here. So it's really subject to opinion as to when the house would be in danger. The regs don't allow us to make a clear distinction here. So again, that's why the bulkhead is proposed. It's similar to what was done next door. It still allows the coastal bank to function as sediment source, and the function of the bulkhead is no different than what fiber rolls would be done if they were successful at the site. So that was my justification for allowing the bank to function, but also allowing it to protect at the same time.
Okay, Mark, thank you.
Yep.
Is there any other discussion amongst the board? Or Kelly?
Yes, David?
David, yeah.
I was going to ask this before. It was mentioned about the erosion rate. Does anybody know the rate of erosion? Or is that an impossible question to answer?
No, we don't. Greg Berman commented on that on the site, and he said that the data is not available for the rivers. Coastal Zone Management did all their shoreline change transects. Most of them are on the coast, if the formal coast, and I don't think any data exists here. It's certainly slow. Admittedly, it's slow.
Okay, I was going to ask, do the people who live there have any idea?
They are on the line. One of the other things we talked about was if the bank eroded very quickly, let's say a hurricane came and it just wiped out the bank, that could do two things. Well, the bank may have to be restored, and which would include, plantings and stabilization and all of that. But excessive amounts of sediment would also bury the marsh, assuming it was still there. And Greg wasn't even certain whether that marsh was going to be there. It just seems like it's progressively deteriorating just due to natural causes. The truth is in there.
I think that's the issue with that. I'm not sure with the that salt marsh there is as much of the salt marsh in the river is like that the same way that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, first of all, in terms of the erosion, it's got to be very, very slow. At that point, if there is a hurricane that comes by and it makes a large change in topography there, I would suspect that within several months, it would probably work its way out again. because that's typically what will happen when we have a heavy like hurricane type event. If we do get something like that, it's devastating, but then it moves on and sort of readjusts relatively quickly.
Mhm.
So I think that given that and the it's got to be a relatively slow erosion rate there, but that's just my comments on that.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. If I thought you were done there, but
No, I was. Rick's got his hand raised, so
okay, Rick.
unmute.
Did Rick?
There we are.
There you go.
I'm in favor of the stairway. However, I have a fundamental problem with the armoring of the bank. I think most of us have seen many examples of banks that have been armored, and the ends typically erode and scour rather significantly. And I almost feel like it will do more damage to the either side of the armoring. I don't know. I think most of us know that part of the river pretty well, and it's a limited fetch from the Venice side, but I don't know. I have a fundamental problem with the armoring, but the staircase I'm fine with.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Anybody else in the commission? Kelly, you good?
I have no other comments.
All right. I don't think I went to the public yet. Anybody from the public who has any comments or concerns, questions about this project, please raise your hand now.
I don't see any hands
I
raised.
don't see any there. All right, so I will come back to the commission. Given the fact that we're looking for planting plans, then I don't know if I'm ready to issue, or at least try and craft an order of conditions until we see that as well, because that may play into how we craft an order of conditions then for this whole project overall. So unless I'm missing something, does everybody agree on that, or?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Do we have any further comments? I mean, I'd like to try and get as much of the comment out of the way now, and then concentrate on anything new that comes from the planting later on. Anybody else? Everybody good on that?
Well, I have to agree with Commissioner Bishop, and that's why I asked Kelly about the erosion rate and that putting up that seawall or CES. I am fundamentally against it too, because I think it's just going to exasperate the loss of this grass down there.
If I may, that was one of the reasons for having the trigger point provision. So in case the sediment loss did occur, and we don't really know if it will, but if it did, we have a manner of managing it within the order.
All right. Any further discussion on this? Mark, are you clear as to what we need to do next in terms of taking care of the planting plan for that impacted area in the southeast or southwest?
Yes, I can make the changes to the plan that we discussed dimensionally and move the staircase over and all of that. I can provide the troops with the Barnstable County list and try to get an idea of what they want to plant down at the bottom. And if there's room on the existing plan, I'll carve out an area that I can put either a planting list and just hatch the planting area. No problem.
Okay. Do you need 2 weeks, 4 weeks?
Well, we can always try 2, and if I can't get it by then, we can bump it. What is that date? Is it?
Actually, yeah, it'll be a little bit longer because it's August 6th.
Okay, yeah,
A little
that's
longer
right.
than 2.
We have an extra week, so that probably will work.
Okay.
I think that was, yeah, so we can continue to August 6th.
All right. Would somebody like to make a motion to continue this hearing until August 6th?
So moved.
All right. Thank you, Ellie. Is there a second?
Second, Tom,
Thank you, Tom. Kelly, could you call the roll?
Bishop,
Aye.
Durkin,
aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Hoops. Hoops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Aye.
Motion to continue carries unanimously to August 6th.
Okay, and the old order of conditions, I'm not even sure this is up to Kelly. But we had come up with a plan of action, but I haven't applied for the certificate of compliance yet. So maybe what we should do is, in the process of doing this, since we have 3 weeks, Kelly and I can work on a solution up top. And if they can get the plants in up top, then we can apply for the COC, and then it might not be an issue. If not, we can tie one to the other like we talked about. But that way we don't have to discuss it too much tonight, if that's okay with you guys, or we certainly can.
Well, my only, because again, you were fading in and out there, Mark. So, I'm understanding the old COC is dependent upon plantings.
Yes.
Mitigation plantings were not carried out under the old order, and the old order has expired. So there's an issue that needs to be resolved there, which I can work with them to get that resolved so that they can request the COC.
Right. I mean, the only thing my only concern about this is I don't want to have somebody spend, money on planting plants in, the first week of August. Probably traditionally when we get the worst drought conditions that we typically get. So
yeah, that's why
that's
I
my only concern.
think we can include a condition in this order that says they can't start work on this project until the old COC is closed out. So that even if that is the fall, then that would, because yeah, that wouldn't be my preference to be trying to plant now.
Okay, I'm fine with that then. All right, so you think you can pull together for the next, well, you see what you can do it. If you can do it, that's great. If not, we'll take it up at the next meeting then.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we can give you an update. You could put it as a discussion item and we can give you an update.
Okay.
Unless I actually file for it, and then we'll all
Yeah,
know.
we'll just see what you can do, and then if you can't, we'll put it down as a discussion item.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Okay, next order of business, another notice of intent for Margaret Smith, 47 Merchant Avenue, Yarmouth, Massachusetts, proposed direct reconstruction of an existing licensed dock on Fawns Pond. And I think this is another Mark, right?
It is. I've got one more after this, and then you're rid of me.
Okay.
Okay, so this, I'm going to speak a little louder in case it's me that's cutting out. So this is the reconstruction of an existing licensed pier. It did exist prior to 1971. I included an aerial in here that clearly shows it existing. Funny enough, if you go into the historicaerials.com and you go back to 1938, the area of the waterway that's directly north of this dock, like a little canal, doesn't exist at all, just for historical reference. Anyhow, so this is an existing 8-foot eight by 18-foot dock. It was too low to the water. It's licensed, or the configuration that you see is exactly per the license. So that's not an issue. It's in conformance with the license. It never did receive an order of conditions. So the applicants want to rebuild it. It was in a state of disrepair a year or so ago, and there was a administrative, I think, approval to repair it. So what they want to do is we want to raise it up so it conforms to the bylaw requirements. They're going to narrow it from 8 feet to 4, and which I'm sure everybody is happy about that. In raising it up, we would extend the dock landward over the steps until it meets one of the steps. So the height is somewhat flexible. The survey didn't survey every height of every step, but I have it, it will be at least 4 feet to the underlying structural member, rounded off to the next highest step. We didn't want to go up 6 feet because we want to be able to use the existing ramp and float and leave them where they are. So by raising it up a couple of feet, we can use the ramp. It doesn't get too much steeper. And then the existing float is an 8 by 24. So none of that would change. The project did go before Waterways on the same date, the 16th. And one of the concerns from Waterways was the depth clearance. So the license plan basically shows the float bottoming out. That's not a surveyed plan. It was a sketch plan. So this is a surveyed plan. And what the survey shows is about 2 feet of water at the seaward end and about 6 inches of water at the landward end of the float. We can do all this with local permitting as long as we stay within or less than the existing footprint. So narrowing the dock doesn't change the license. It would be at most a minor project modification. The applicants are not opposed to using grading on the decking of the raised dock if you feel that 4 feet isn't quite adequate. But that's the reason why we only went to the 4 feet, was because of the regs and using the ramp. As far as the float goes, it's aging in its condition. I wouldn't feel comfortable putting float stops on it now, but you know, if the order is open for 3 years, what the applicants have said is that likely they're going to be replacing that float. So a new float could be both designed and strengthened to accept float stops at that time. And of course, the order wouldn't be closed out until those float stops existed. And we were thinking, in other projects, we've talked about the kind of float stop, you know, the flip up ones, and that's fine. And we talked about how much the float might dip. So in this case, if there's 2 feet of water at the end and you do a 2.5 foot float stop, a 24 foot float would only be tilting 6 inches from one end to the other. So that's not immediately terrible to me. So in part of maintaining the float, it will likely get replaced in the near future along with the pilings. But that's all part of maintaining a licensed structure. So that's really about it. The piles that are there are going to be in the same distance, and they're just going to be closer together. Same number of pile. Dock gets raised up. So with that, I'll address questions.
All right, thank you, Mark. Any comments, questions from the commission?
I just have one, and it's a typo. Mark, you might want to look at it. The one that's the aerial view that you have on your plan here says 80 inches by 24 float, and the drawing is 8 feet by 24 feet.
Correct. Actually, we were able to correct that, and Kelly has a copy of a revised plan. So okay. Yes, there was another typo too, but I'm not going to tell you where it was.
Oh, you're going to keep me up all night looking for it?
You could. It's in the okay. It's in the abutter on the left side. I had copied the deed book and page from the same label, so the deed book and page was wrong for Mr. Nevins, but that's been corrected as well. I don't want you to lose sleep, Ellie.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to be up most of the night anyways.
Also, this seems to be a pattern. I'm sorry. There's a open order of conditions that the applicant was made aware of some time ago. We've been trying to get it closed. It needed plantings, and there was a snafu in communication between us and McNamara Landscaping. So the plants, it was to restore a vegetative buffer from a previous project, from the steps, the stone steps, I believe. So that is still in process. The The option for the applicant is they can install the plants now, and they're going to be here all summer to water them, or McNamara will hold on to them until the fall and install them then. So either way, that's in process. And again, we would add a condition on this order that says, you know, don't do any work to the dock until the old order is closed out, but it is being actively pursued.
Okay, very good. Anybody else from the commission?
Rick has his
Hey,
hand
Chairman.
up.
Rick, yep.
Well, I feel as though this is a net gain improvement over what's existing there, and I think it's a good thing. And just for your information, Mark, I recall when that little opening was cut in, either the late 60s or very early 70s, that went hand in hand with the development when that was put in there. So that was a man-made water feature, if you will.
Mhm.
All right, thank you, Rick. Yeah, I agree. This is definitely an improvement. Mark, with the access, I see the access is around the top of the step, or the top of the walk there. Is that something that people can actually see, that they actually know that it's there, or?
Yeah, we could add, it's not
Sure,
there now, of course. We can add the Chapter 91 access signs. I have a blank one, so I can write in the license and you can put it on the side of the dock. And that way people would know if anybody strolls along that shoreline, but they would know to walk up and around.
Yeah, I'd like to see that added, just only because, you know, I mean, I don't know how many people are actually going to be walking in there, but just to cross everybody's, you know, concerns off the list. That way, nobody's going to be offended by it. So.
Yeah, I have some blank ones I can make up.
Okay. Anybody else from the commission? Kelly?
So Waterways supported the project, but yeah, asked for an increase in height to get the float off the bottom. But Mark has stated that the float is not actually on the bottom. It is still very shallow, so I think it is still worth considering ways of moving that float out so that it isn't in such shallow water, such as increasing the length of the pier a little more and reducing the size of the float so that that landward end of it is further out. So that was one option. They also just wanted to bring your attention to the DMF comments. There's a time of year restriction from March 15 through June 30. Their research shows that there should be a 1.5 to 1 height to width ratio, which would actually put this at needing to be 6 feet above the marsh. So Mark is proposing, instead of the 6 feet, using a grating over the whole dock. I think to a certain extent we have an obligation to follow DMF's recommendations. They are their comments that they've provided. So I think that might just require a little more consideration about options for that. Yeah, I think the float stops are important. It would be great to see those in now, but if it can be conditioned so that when the float is replaced, those are installed, but within the permit period, so that that actually gets done within a relatively short time frame. I think that is all I have. I mean, it's an 8x12 float. An 8x12 float? 8x24 float air at the moment, which is a pretty large float considering the location and the use. So there maybe is the opportunity to reduce the size of the float so that it is less impactful. I think that is all I have.
Well, Kelly, you jogged my memory. I do remember us talking about shortening that float so that the inboard side is not in that shallow water, and having them lengthen the dock a little more. To overall, the size is the same,
Yeah.
but it just gets it off the bottom so that they, even if they do install float stops, it's not such a big structure that it's it could be torqued or broken in the middle.
Mhm.
Okay, anything else amongst the commission? Kelly, I'm going to ask you, do you want us to go ahead with to try and do an order of conditions right now, or considering the different things that are going to be added, do you just want to continue this and wait for a revised plan with this, or how do you want to do it?
I'm not sure. I guess it depends what the commission's asking for in terms of plan changes. Whether you're requesting changes to the plan or want to vote on it as it is designed.
Well, we're looking for floats. That I just wanted, we have a note on the plan for that. But you want the float stops installed before the expiration of the order.
Yeah, that could be included as a condition.
Okay. And then are you good just with including the DMF comments with the modification that Mark has proposed for adding the grading and rather than raising to a 6-foot height? Can we do that we can just include that as part of the conditions then?
So yeah, that could be a condition to include grading.
Right, and you don't need any plan change then.
So yeah, if the height's not going to be increased, then we wouldn't need the plan change.
What about the length? Have
I was going to say, are we going to do something with the length there? Rick, did you have a comment one way or the other on that, or?
Well, based on Kelly's comments and Ellie's comments from Waterways, I feel like it needs a little more thought and discussion from the commission about whether we think it would make sense to lengthen the fixed pier as a way to get the float further out into the water. I think I'd be in favor of that based on DMF and Waterways.
I agree. Anybody else?
Yes,
Go ahead.
David. Sorry. I'm a little confused about the DMF saying they would like it to be elevated at least 6 feet off the marsh versus what's proposed and which way we as a commission want to go. Someone help me with that.
So I think DMF is asking for, because of the aspect ratio that they do with the design, that it would require the dock or the deck to be 6 feet above the marsh. Mark is saying that that would require a lot more effort to do that, and that we could probably get the same benefit in terms of light penetration. We would reduce the incidence of light blocking by instead.
You just froze.
Mm-hmm.
I think he froze.
Raise it up. You could just allow the sunlight to get through the grating.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
If I could add to that.
Sure.
So many years ago, all the bylaws from town to town wanted a 1-to-1 height to width ratio to the decking. And then DMF commented that they wanted it to the underlying structural member. So then the docks went up a little higher. Even though that's a preferential comment, the boards, a lot of them didn't change their regulations. They just adopted a new outlook, if you will. So that went on for several years. Well, actually, way back in 2008, I got a dock permitted that was only 19 inches off the ground because it was using grading. And that's because grading was considered like as good as sliced bread back then. So DMF has gradually backed off on all of this. They do agree that the grading is better, but they still want the dock 6 feet high. And now what I run into is neighbors complain that these docks look like skyscrapers. The other thing is that I've read John Logan's report, and although he's suggesting that the 1.5 to 1 would improve, that would reduce the shading, it certainly would mathematically. But he doesn't really have any data to support it because not many people have built their docks that high. And he does admit that in the report. So it is a preferential comment. None of the regulations on the Cape have been revised to reflect that as a requirement. So there are some areas where we can do it on a new dock. You know, we can do that. The ones that we just did on Dina's Pond, I think those are 5 feet with grading, but that's a brand new dock. So again, here, I was just trying to work with what we had and not have to make the ramp longer because it will get steeper as we go up. So I was just trying to work with what we have and just improve it as much as possible, realistically possible. The only other thing is if we change the dock and make it longer, what I would like to do, I can't say that that's entirely possible. I mean, it's certainly possible. I don't know how that impacts the license. So there are times when a minor project modification is allowed. You can reduce square footage. You can extend a float like 1 foot seaward. If it goes more than that, it would have to be licensed. The changes would have to be licensed. So I don't know how they would consider lengthening of the pier and making it narrower. You're certainly going to gain, we're going to reduce the square footage, but I don't know if they're going to consider that a minor project modification. And I'd rather not relicense this thing. I could ping Dave Hill and ask him. The other thing is extending the dock is about $550 a linear foot. The bottom that's out there, I weighted out another 80 feet and it only gets another 6 inches deeper. So we can push it out quite a bit and we're only going to get inches of gain in water depth. So again, that's why we didn't propose any of those changes. So I feel that the float stops are viable. I just am scared to put them on an old float. I don't want it to crack in the middle, even if we use 6 of them. But they're more than happy to do it when they rebuild the float, which they feel is going to be in the nearer future. I hope that helps.
Any further discussion amongst the commission? If not, would somebody like to make a motion? No, I'm sorry. Before we do that, I want to get the feel. Does the commission want to extend it or no?
I would like to extend it. I don't have a problem at all with the height, but I would like to get it away from the shore and away from the marsh grass.
Okay, anybody else have a comment on this? I need to know which way the commission would like to go with that.
I concur with Rick.
All right. Anybody else? David, Paul, Tom, anybody, Pat?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, Rick, you said extend it. Are you talking about the just making the whole thing longer?
Yes, the actual dock portion of this application, I would like to see it brought out further so it's clear of the edge of the shore and the marsh grass.
Mhm.
And that way we could achieve a little further extension of the float.
And you're reducing the float size.
That's correct.
Too.
Yeah, that's right.
That's correct, yeah. Now, the other thing, Mark, is because it's 8 feet wide and we're going to 4 feet, if I may be wrong in this, but the overall size of the float, square footage of the float, would still be within the license that they have now if you bring it out a little and shorten the float, because you're already dropping the square footage. So I'd ping him and see what he thinks, but I would think overall, if the square footage doesn't change and the length doesn't change, there's nothing that would change in the licensing.
Licensing, yeah.
I agree that that's sound reasoning. I just don't know the answer because the pier itself would be extending further seaward. If it requires a new license, I just assume push everything out and leave the float the way, leave the float in its current configuration and just push everything out. if it's a minor project modification and we can do it by extending the dock, and let's say we extend the dock 4 or 5 feet and we chop off 4 feet of the float. If that's a minor project modification and the applicants are okay with that, because it does add expense to the dock, then we can look into that. So I guess what I would suggest is, why don't we bump this 2 weeks? Nothing's urgent. Let me call DEP Waterways and see which way they would go on this, and we can come back with a proposal, or tell you anyway what the result of those decisions is.
All right, that sounds like a good plan there, Mark.
Yeah.
Everybody agreement with that?
Absolutely. That's good. Thank you, Mark.
I agree.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
I
That's-
agree.
think that's the best way to go, proceed with that. So if that's the case, then could we get a motion to continue this to August 6th?
So moved. Bishop.
Second,
Thank you, Bishop.
Ellie,
Bishop.
Lawrence.
All right, Ellie, thank you. Kelly, could you call the roll?
Bishop,
Aye.
Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
aye.
Oops,
Aye.
Huggins,
All right,
Mulhern.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously to continue to August 6th.
All right, thank you, everybody, and thank you, Mark. Next order of business, another notice of intent for Tushar and Karen Miara, 75 Partridge Valley Road, Yarmouth, Massachusetts, proposed seasonal clock, proposed seasonal dock on Jabinette's Pond. I'll get that out there eventually. Sorry, folks.
It's
Do I
okay.
need to say that again to actually make it sound like what it's actually supposed to be? It's a proposed seasonal deck. Oh, my Lord. You know what it is. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. Proposed seasonal dock on Jabinette's Pond.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mark Burgess again, Shorefront Consulting, representing the applicant. So this is a standard seasonal dock. We looked into the water depth. I'll get into that in a minute. The dock is 120 square feet below the ordinary water line, and the 10-foot ramp is above the water line. And this is in line with the way a couple of other seasonal docks were approved in Long Pond. Total square footage is 160, but it is 120 that extends beyond the average high water line. So I mentioned in my narrative how we came up with an average water line. I talked to Carl, and there is no data in the town records as to what the average water level in this pond is. So there's an elevation shown on a USGS map that's in a different datum, but the level that I came up with is close to that level, converted to the NVD 88 datum. But basically, the way I came up with the water level was there's a concrete weir, if you call it, a floodgate at the opposite end of the pond. And with all the boards removed, the top of the concrete, I measured that below the water level at the time of the survey, and then I just transferred that elevation over to the other side of the pond. So there's a stake on the far left-hand side of the path that shows what we've determined to be, in my data, the average water level, and that level is the same as the top of the concrete. So under normal circumstances, assuming the pond was spring-fed and all that, if anybody was to remove all of the boards, the pond would not go below that depth. At that point in time, it was about 2.5 feet, 2 feet 4 inches maybe, where the stake is right now. I went out there yesterday afternoon and I measured the stake again, and it's 2.1 feet as of yesterday. So even though we've had not much rain and we had a wet spring, but a pretty dry past 6 weeks, the water elevation still meets the bylaw in that location. So, and in trying to conform to what's called the average low water, what I'm proposing to the commission based on my data is that even though the water level meets the performance requirements today, and even if that was 10 months of the year, if the pond drops in August, well, it would have, it would have to drop quite a bit to make an average below 2 feet. So I would suggest that you have 2 feet of water at this site for probably 10 months of the year. But that's where I came up with the data. I had to do it separately. Some people didn't realize that concrete weir existed, but it's over there in the woods. Beyond that, so there's an abutter that I know is online here. It will have the opportunity to speak when you go to public comment. I was unaware, actually, that, and I'll admit that, I was unaware that the property line was only 45 feet wide at this location. That's the tie line that you see on the plan that goes from the iron pipe. It's a dotted line that goes across to the opposite property line. So the dock was situated nearly in the middle of the property, but it was offside. If you've been out there, you'll see that the dock was offset to the left of the path as you go down to the water. The existing path is fairly wide. Yep, there it is. So the existing path is fairly wide. So I didn't want to put it right in the middle, obviously. So I chose one side, and that side is about 24.7 feet from the center line. The center line is 24.7 feet from the south property line, which is Mr. Rosala's property, and about 20.5 feet from the north property line. It was angled. It probably could be straightened out a little bit if it was rotated clockwise. But when I positioned it, it just looked like it was in line with the bowl of the pond, if you will. So we've run into this on several occasions. Dinah's Pond is another one where it's not the topography that reduces the lot width, it's the shape of the lot. And it's because if you have frontage along a circular waterway, of course, everybody gets a pie piece. So the pie gets narrower as you get closer to the water. Having said that, the abutter has asked us to move the dock to the north as far as possible because they don't want to see it or they want to see it as little as possible. We can do that. It would, and I don't know if Kelly has that picture, but it would move about 6 feet to the north as you're looking at the screen right now, 6 feet up the plan toward Jabinet's Pond. And we could angle it a little bit more clockwise. And when I talked to Mr. Rosales yesterday, he was agreeable to that. Otherwise, I think it's going to be contentious. So we can move it. If the board agrees, we would move it to the other side of the path and rotate it a little bit. I would also suggest that we get a letter from the property owner to the north with any comments that they may have to let them know, because it's different than the plan that was submitted for the public. So this would be continued to gain that information. Other than that, it meets all of your bylaws, depth, distances, lengths, all of that. Let me see. If you had a copy of Mr. Rosales' letter, I think I've spoken to most of the points. But basically, they don't want to see it. We don't know who the swim float belongs to. And I guess that's about it for now.
All right, thank you, Mark. Well, I was going to ask about the swim float. So nobody knows who it is, or it just sits there year after year, all forlorn and lonely, and
nobody's owned up to it, so we can only assume that it's somebody close by, but we don't. It's not unconfirmed at this point.
I mean, that is supposed to be permitted at this point, right, Kelly?
Yeah, I think swim floats are usually licensed through
Harbor Master.
Harbor Master, so I could check with him if he has anything on file for it.
Yeah, I would, well, I mean, I think if we can't find a liable or a logical owner, we should probably take that up at another meeting then and discuss what we're gonna do with it, but.
I assume it belongs to the property to the north that has the beach area and some boats there. It looks like it's just out from their property.
Okay. All right, well, on to this, the matter before us.
Oh, can I say
Commission?
one more thing?
Yep,
I'm sorry. There is a drafting error on the plan. I take full responsibility for it. The abutters as listed on the plan are reversed. So on the plan, it shows Rosales being the property to the north and Kohanlu being the property to the south. They're reversed. So I've corrected it drafting wise, but if I'm going to revise the plan anyway, I'll wait. But that is a drafting error on my part, and we will correct that.
okay, so noted. Thank you, Mark.
Mhm.
Commissioners, any questions, comments for Mark?
I have a couple of questions, Ed, if I may.
Okay, go ahead, Tom.
Mark, you've addressed a number of the concerns that, excuse me, the abutter has brought forward. The abutter, in quoting the regulations, says that the center line of the pier shall be a minimum of 25 feet from any property line. This plan does not meet that regulations. Am I correct in that?
You are correct. That was an oversight on my part.
So
we would have to request a variance against that regulation to locate the float where we'd like to put it now, which can be done at the hearing, or I can submit a formal request. It would be based on the lot, the shape of the lot, not topography.
explain that to me, Mark.
Well, in zoning, well, in variances in general, sometimes the lot, well, you grant a variance in various situations where you can't meet the particular portion of the bylaw, sort of through no fault of your own. So as we've explained in other projects, when the shoreline is flat, straight, if you will, then the property lines are usually straight, and you have an even, somewhat, in general, on the average, you have an even width of a lot. When you get to a pond and a circular embayment, all the properties become, in a lot of cases, pie pieces. So they get narrower and narrower as you get to the water. Dinah's Pond is another example of that. So it becomes, through no fault of anybody, it becomes difficult to meet these setbacks. Now that the setbacks were developed for navigational purposes and for, I believe, possibly aesthetics and things like that. I had initially thought that this was going to need a license, and I was thinking the general license requires 15 feet for freshwater and 25 for salt. So I was thinking freshwater, and it's a freshwater project. But yes, correctly stated, your bylaw has the 25-foot setback from the center line in the freshwater regs.
Thank you. We have no depth of water registered for August, do we?
No, it's not August yet, and the survey was done after that last year, I believe. But
okay, and the depth of water depends upon the amount of water that's drained from the pond to the cranberry bog. Is that correct?
yeah, I guess so. And that elevation would be if you removed all of the boards on that concrete structure. There's a picture of it in the filing.
Uh-huh.
If you removed all the boards, the water can only go down to the top of that concrete. And that is the elevation that I used as the average water level. So currently there's 2.1 feet of water at that level. And here we are in July. So there's only one more month to go. So they would have to pump the pond down. If they open the weir and let it drain, it's only going to drain to the height that it is now, basically, within 1/10 of a foot. They would have to pump it out to get it lower than that.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Sure.
All right, you said, Tom?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else on the commission?
I have a question, two questions.
All right,
David,
David?
you just mentioned pumping. Do they pump it out in October? Do you know?
I don't know. I think the abutter stated that they drain the pond. We don't know how. We can only assume that it's done with that concrete weir. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Second question is, I noticed, so the full length of the dock is 30 feet, right?
40 feet.
40 feet.
Right?
There's a reason why it has to be, I'm sorry, what?
I'm checking.
Okay.
Yes, it's 40 feet. So it's 4 10-foot sections, 120 square feet below the ordinary water line, and then 40 square feet above it as a ramp.
Okay, so when you say on your project description, 4 feet wide, 30 feet long, and utilize a 10-foot section from the ramp, from the dock to the upland path, what is in the water exactly? Is it 30 feet or 40 feet?
30 feet.
30 feet. And there's a reason why it has, when I went out there, I said, wow, 30 feet, that goes pretty far out in there. Is there a reason why he needs it that long?
Yes, we're required to reach 2 feet of water at the ordinary water level, no further than 30 feet out. So
Okay.
I had to go 30
Thank you.
feet. I had to go 30 feet to get to that depth.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, anybody else on the commission?
Is there, this is Ellie, sorry.
Ellen?
The contour lines mark, 9, 10, 11, but it doesn't show us the depth of the water. Is the whole pond just 2 feet or just the outskirts or the edges?
Oh, I've been told that it's about 8 feet deep in the middle. But you can see if you look at the elevation view, you'll see the existing grade dropping as it goes. It's pretty flat. The last 10 feet, that's why I had to go 30 feet out. The last 10 feet doesn't change much. It has a pretty good slope. And then right about the fourth section, it flattens out quite a bit. But I was able to squeak by and get the 2 feet, 30 feet out.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, anybody else on the commission? Kelly?
So a question just occurred to me while you were talking about the water level, Mark. You were saying that with the weir, with all the boards removed, there was kind of like a minimum level that the pond is going to drop to through that point. But the pond could actually drop lower than that just through evaporation, right? And just through, greater outputs than inputs, especially if we're not having much rain.
Yes, some of these ponds are hydraulically connected through the water table.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what the lowest level could be. I know that when we measured it, when we did the survey, when I measured it, when I did the evaluation, and then when the survey was done, and then now in July, which is probably 9 or 10 months worth of data, it's been above the required level that whole time.
Right. Okay. Okay. So we did have the letter from the abutter, Mr. Azales, and that letter was sent to all of the commissioners. So you all have a copy of that. Mr. Chairman, do you need me to read that into the record, or
No, I think we'll
wants-
just say that it is part of the record, and I think everybody has had a chance to read that, or that they were given the opportunity to read it. So unless they have if somebody has a question about it specifically, that's fine. But I don't think we need to read it in, just to state that it is a part of the permanent record. And I believe Mark did an able job of basically highlighting the issues that Mr. Rosales had with and stated in the letter. So
Okay, so then my other point was you don't have the proposed changes before you because that was a discussion that we had today. But the proposed relocation would move the dock closer to the neighbor to the north and increase, well, I guess increase the need for the variance from the setback to the property line on the north side. And Tom, your question with regard to the variance, so that he would need to request a variance to that regulation to be able to put the dock in its current location and in any new proposed location. And I just wanted to, because there was some kind of question around the grounds for that in terms of lot size, lot shape. We don't mention that in our regulations. The text that we do have with regard to variance in our regulations states that the commission may at its discretion waive one or more of the regulations when the proposed work potentially represents a significant ecological improvement when compared with existing conditions, or will not adversely affect any areas subject to the protection of the regulations. In addition, the commission may at its discretion waive one or more of the regulations when there's an overriding public benefit or safety issue at hand and there is no feasible alternative to the proposed work. So just to clarify, that's what our regulations state with regard to issuing a variance. So I guess in this respect, we would probably be looking at the part as to whether it doesn't pose a significant ecological improvement, but it will not adversely affect any areas subject to protection of the regulations. I'm assuming that would be the area of the text that we'll be referring to.
I would agree.
Understood, but the issuance of the variance depends upon the interpretation of those who are sitting on the decision for the variance. Am I correct?
Yes, and then the other consideration is that the property owner to the north, we haven't received any contact from them, but if there is a proposed relocation of the dock, then the property owner to the north should certainly have the opportunity to comment on that.
Thank you.
And there is a, oh, we haven't gone to public comment yet. There is a raised hand.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, my only, I don't see I don't see the use in changing the plan and moving regardless of where you put the dock, the variance is going to be required for the setback to the sideline, to the property line. So I don't see any real benefit to moving it to the north and then requiring, you know, we've already notified the abutter, and the abutters have the opportunity to look at it. Now we're saying, oh, we're going to change the location, which is going to require the abutter that is now going to be closer to the dock to be notified again. And I don't see the real reason behind doing that. So I would propose that we should keep it as proposed and not try and move it any further one way or the other. I mean, I think they've put it sort of as best they could in the middle of the parcel. So that's just my opinion. Any further discussion amongst the commission? If not, we'll move over to, we've got two comments. Karen Misra, had your hand up first. I will recognize you first and then go to Stephen Rosales. So Karen, if you would state your name for the record too, please.
This is Karen Misra.
I'm sorry for making a mess of your name there.
That's all right. We have like a list of pretty creative, we've been Miss Sarah, it's, you know, but anyway, I just want to say the floating dock does belong to the Sweeneys, which is 2 properties to the north. It actually attaches to their little pier that they have. And that's all original to like the original owners that's been there for like a long time. They bought the house 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years. So they own that dock.
Okay, well, thank you for that clarification. That helps. Did you have anything else for this project, or?
No, I think Mark has done a great job, and we'll let him speak for us.
Okay, thank you very much. Now moving on to Stephen Rosales. You need to unmute yourself as well.
Yes,
okay,
yes,
you
thank you. No, you got it, Rosales. I appreciate that. First of all, thank you to the commission, and special thanks to Ms. Grant and Ms. Green to letting me get through the technical stuff to get on a virtual meeting. Our family, and you've seen my letter, I write for 4 generations of us Rosaleses. I guess Rosale might be plural. My dad bought the property here back when I was in high school. I'm now 64. So we're coming up on 50 years of owning this property. We love this pond. We have great affection for this pond. We've grown up on this pond. Now great-grandchildren are growing up on this pond. We've swum in our beach. We've rowed our rowboat. We've floated around in floating chairs. We've fished. We've walked around, basically around the shoreline for many years. Many of the new homes didn't exist. I had the nice happenstance of meeting Mr. Burgess yesterday as he was wading around in his waders in his pond. And we've been here so long that the big blue water tower that supplies water, I assume, to Yarmouth did not exist when we first there. So when that popped up in our vista, that certainly was shocking. So we got this application from our neighbor. I have not had the pleasure of meeting the neighbor, but we knew the previous occupants. That house is relatively new. When we first moved, there was there was this one, maybe 3 to our right, and then a couple to our left. So there weren't any on, I think, Higgins Kroll, and there weren't any on Buck Island at that point in time. And some other houses have filled in around where I am on Partridge Valley. But be that as it may, when the PVC pipe first popped up, we wondered what it was. A notice was given to my mom, who received it recently. She's 89, and gave it, of course, to me. So we've now come to learn what that pipe is. And where that pipe is, sits directly in front of our property and our swimming beach. It's an area that we have swum in, that my kids have swum in, and now grandkids and now great-grandkids have swum in. To put a 4-foot wide dock, at least where that pipe is, it's visually offensive. It's unattractive, made of aluminum. I understand it comes in and comes out, but this is a seasonal house. That's what it's used for. So it goes in April and comes out in November. So that the seasonal aspect of it really doesn't affect us. But it's big. The water is very shallow there. We know because we've swam in it for all these years. The shoreline is 45 feet. Previous owner had no difficulties putting a kayak in and out, paddleboard in and out, canoe in and out, just like we have no trouble putting in our rowboat. The water is pretty pristine. It is fed in the middle. Back in the 70s, my dad had some type of hydrology study done. I'll give it to Carl when I can find it. But there is a deep spot in the middle of the pond. We know because when we had our floating chair, we'd go out there and dive in, and it's probably, I don't know, 12, 15, 16 feet maybe at the deepest point. And there are springs down there. At least that's where the cold water would come in at that point in time, in that point. They've been fishing the pond. It's a nice spot. I may come back to you later as an ancillary thing to deal with some of the vegetation that seems to be choking the pond. But I will save that for another day. Uh-oh, have I lost you? I hope not.
Nope, you're good.
Okay, because I can't see. It's tough talking just to my name, so I apologize.
That's okay. We all have to get used to the virtual meeting.
So we're doing the best we can, and I appreciate it very much. So, you know, we got the design. I looked at your regulations, and as properly pointed out by one of the commissioners here in this particular part of the hearing, there's no place you could put that dock that is farther than 25 feet from any property line. Now, I want to be a good neighbor. I understand it. We love the pond. We hope our neighbors to the right of us will love the pond as much as we do. But that's a big structure that they proposed. In my opinion, or at least in my reading of it, at 160 square feet, looking at the definitions as laid out in the letter that I sent, it's too big. It's limited to 120 feet, but that's 160 feet, and it includes the ramp. I get it's a ramp, but your own definitions include the ramp. It's too big. Number two, there's no place you can put it that is outside of 25 feet from any property line. I don't see a measurement. I have no reason to doubt Mr. Burgess. He was a gentleman and very, very professional. I liked him very much. We just disagreed on the placement and the size and the need for that. But that's why they make chocolate and vanilla, as I've told him. But we want to be good neighbors. We want people to enjoy the pond as much as we have, and we will continue to do it. But we want to have it done in a way that doesn't impede on what we have already enjoyed for nearly 50 years, which is our swimming area. I suppose when you put a boat, and there's never been a motor on this pond to our knowledge. There's never been a gasoline powered motor on this pond to our knowledge. There are no oil slicks. It's a pure pond. Matter of fact, when we first moved here in the early 70s, or when my dad bought it when I was in high school in the early 70s, there was a pump, and a lot of the water that we came into the house, drinking water, came from the pond. There's still sort of remnants of it outside our little seawall that we have that define the beach that's been there for probably since the place was built. But the town has since put in town water. But the point is that it's a pristine pond. So I'm hoping that the neighbors, if they do get this dock, keep motors off the pond because it is pristine. But to the point is you have a wharf or a dock. They're going to put, I assume, tie up kayaks, rowboats, sailboats, maybe paddle boats, those type of things to it. I suppose dock them or moor them on the side of them, which makes it wider, which impedes closer and more into our property line if you go straight across and into our historically used swimming area. As I said, the previous owner, we knew pretty well. They had a whole flotilla that really have no difficulty getting in and out just by pulling them up on shore and wading in the 6 inches and getting in. So we have an issue with the size. We have this issue with the location. And, you know, there is an issue on the water depth. Now I've looked at I don't want to be a policy wonk, but I didn't write the regulations. The town of Yarmouth wrote the regulations, and I assume we're past, if it's akin to my hometown of Belmont, where I've been a selectman up there, passed by a 2/3 margin of town meeting. So those say that they use the average low water level, not the water level as being described by Mr. Burgess, who I'll defer to his expertise. He didn't write these regulations either, but the average seasonal low water, minimum of 2 foot of water depth must, and that's not my word, that's the town's regulation word, must be achieved at the terminal end at the average seasonal low water. If the minimum water depth cannot be achieved within the maximum 30-foot length of pier, the project cannot, and that's there, I'm quoting, be approved. So average seasonal low water is defined, as you see, is the present arithmetic mean of low water heights observed over a 1-year period using the best available data as determined by the DEP. Again, I didn't write it. I'm just quoting it. And I guess of the OHM or whatever the attempt to calculate it by Mr. Burgess. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a surveyor. I'm not a, there's a reason why I'm not an accountant, but we're just taking his word for it. I also don't see a measurement that shows that it's not closer to 25 feet from our property line. I've looked at the measurement, and if you put that up there, I mean, he mentioned it, I guess he was speaking that how far it is or isn't from our property line. But the plan as I'm reading it, and as shown on the screen a little while ago, I don't see any measurement that says that it's farther away than 25 feet from my particular line. But then again, I don't want to shove it onto the neighbor on the other side. The regulations are the regulations. So, you know, now having met by happenstance and enjoyed my meeting with Mr. Burgess, we did chat about, I can only speak for me and my family, we did chat about some possible workarounds or possible compromises. Again, in the spirit of being good neighbors, and understanding that we're now in the 2020 and we're not 1970s anymore. We can appreciate that too. So when he moved over, and I have some pictures of him, I don't know if he gave them to you, that might have been, I forwarded to him yesterday, but he, from where that PVC pipe is that you have a picture of, he moved over, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10 feet, and he stood. And that was a lot preferable to where we were, to where the pipe currently is, at least by way of potential compromise. Then for total disclosure, he asked me to come on over to the applicant's property, which I did. And I stood where, looked down the path where he wants to put it and took a picture of him, sort of where he was at the, I guess, the northernmost point of that, what I'll call the path, the clearing that has historically been there. And okay, I could probably live with that. The other suggestion that I had with him was, in a spirit of compromise, if he could angle it further, I guess Mr. Burgess called it clockwise. I read the regulations as saying that you want to have it, any docks preferably perpendicular to the shoreline. So I'm looking at that plan and I'm seeing that it seems to be not quite perpendicular to the blue shoreline. And if he twisted it, I guess, clockwise and made it perpendicular to, I guess that's solid, there's some blue lines. I hope I'm reading them, some dotted, blotted blue lines and a solid blue line. That seems to be the shoreline. So if he kicked it, I guess, clockwise, and farther away from our property, so that when they moored a boat there, that would be less intrusive on on our place. That might be a fair workaround. I also suggested that, okay, if this comes in and out every year, how do we know that it's going to go back in the same place? The applicants could sell People can move it, they put it in a different spot. But if there was a compromise to be reached, we would want to have it put in the same place. I asked them about a footing or some type of marking as to whether or not, so that they would know every year where the placement of that dock should go, should a dock be permitted and allowed. And he did have a suggestion. He said in some towns, they actually want a footing. This town apparently frowns on that, but he did suggest putting in some type of an iron pipe at grade, bang it down into the bottom that could be found with a metal detector of some type. And so that would ensure that the dock placement from year to year would be in the same place. So we want to be good neighbors. Our preference would be that there's no dock at all. But understanding that at least for our family, or for me, speaking on behalf of our family in my meeting with Mr. Burgess yesterday, we are open to a compromise if necessary to move it farther away from our property line and, I guess, twist it a little bit, angle it so it's more perpendicular or shooting more to the northward than it currently is. Clockwise, I think, as Mr. Burgess said it. As far as the water level, yes, the water level, late July, August, September, it gets extremely low. The vegetation pops up. You can go out a long way before it gets your knees. That's for sure. Again, I'm not a geologist, but that's just been a historical experience for all these decades. And that's what happens, which then brings up to my other concern with him as I'm reading it, this thing has to be 2 feet off of 2 feet above the water level. And then the water has to be 2 feet. So when the water shrinks, I think Mr. Burgess on a previous application
Lose him?
All right, so I think we've lost him. I think he was getting to the point where he's pretty much gotten everything. He's mentioned everything in his letter at least once. So and if he can come back, we can finish up very quickly. If not, I think we're going to have to move on. Does anybody on the commission, any commissioners have any further discussion on this? Paul?
Yeah, just a couple questions. Are there other docks like this on this pond?
I don't believe on this pond, is there?
There's a short dock that 2 properties to the north.
Okay, the other question is, how big is the pond? Is it a question about the acreage it covers appropriate?
It's not on the list of great ponds in Massachusetts.
Okay.
Which means it's less than 10 acres.
Correct.
Thank
I
you.
think it was about 7 or 8.
And I have a picture of me standing in the water. It's on my phone, so I'd have to turn on my video and I can show it to you if I think you guys have to turn on my video.
I don't think we're able to turn on the video in a webinar, but I do have it in my email. If the commission wants to see it, I can. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm looking, I'm looking at the plans, and when I first looked at it, it was almost square to the land. But if they do angle it a little clockwise, which is what I originally thought, and sort of paralleled it between the property line layout, it would adjust it, say maybe 15 degrees clockwise. It would tweak it over a little and still be feasible.
Yeah, I think, Ellie,
go-
I think as I'm saying the same thing, so I think I would agree with that. I'm sorry, who did I step on?
Me, David.
Oh, David, go ahead.
It's okay. Just to go along with what Paul asked about how big the pond is. The reason I asked about the length of the dock was because it's not a very big pond. The only dock I saw was the one to the right, and very, very small, almost looked more like a raft than a dock. and my concern is that it's, you know, what we do this dock, then the next person wants one, and before you know, you have like a spoke of a wheel with in the middle, very little room to do anything. It's not a big pond, and that's my concern from the beginning.
I think that's been a concern of ours all along, even along like Bass River and Lewis Bay, and that's why we've incorporated a no docking areas. And I think we at some point we should relook at that area of the no docks, because we are getting to be a spoked town.
I agree with Ellie.
This is Pat. Won't we need a variance no matter what to start this project?
Yes.
So shouldn't we just go from there?
I mean, that's ultimately the question is, you know, I mean, before Mr. Rosales was speaking, I was getting the impression that you were okay with with that one variance. But I need to, it's certainly one of the things that we need to find out. It's like, are you willing to grant this? It's only one variance that you're granting. The variance would directly involve the side setbacks, the distance from the dock to the property lines on either side, and there is no way for them to achieve the regulation. So there would have to, regardless of the configuration, it would have to be a variance. And so the only thing they could really do to tweak that a little bit is what, like LA was saying, was to rotate that dock, the end of the dock by several degrees clockwise, so they could maximize the distance from both property lines. So that's where we're sitting at this point. So let's try and figure that out. Are you willing to entertain the variance?
Well, as a general rule, we've sort of looked hard at one variance and looked even harder at two variances and sort of denied the two or more. It's really up to the feeling of the rest of the board. I just, I hate seeing, as we know, docks being put out willy-wally all over the place as new people buy a house and want to have access to the water where you can just wade in with your boat and launch it. I don't know.
This is Pat. I would think.
Oh, hold on. I heard Pat first, so
I was just thinking, before we would even think of a variance, we would have to see if the property owners on the other side are, aware of the new ideas of the changes, and see their input before we would go any further.
They've been given the opportunity to make the I mean, they've been notified. So had they had a concern, I think we should still, being the kind neighbor would be the best approach there, and would be to say, to let them know that. But the abutters have been notified.
Okay.
I think there's, Ed, if I might.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more to this than simply to entertain the variance at this particular time. I would like to continue this for at least 2 weeks and see what evolves.
Okay, so I mean, so I just want to get a sense from the Chris, because I don't want to continue it for 2 weeks if in 2 weeks we're going to just turn around and say no, we're not going to allow it. If we're not going to entertain the variance, like I said, the variance is going to be there. They can't put a dock in without having this variance.
I would say I agree with Ellie. I just think in this particular case, in this particular pond, I would not vote for a variance. I would not vote for the dock either. So
I would tend to follow with David and Ellie.
Okay, thank you for comments. Paul?
Yeah, of course, it's described in Kelly's information as a privately owned pond. I might know the answer to this question already, but is there any kind of a homeowners association that controls any of these types of things in that area?
I don't know, Mark, do you know?
I don't know. Maybe the Mizras or Rosales.
Mizras, yeah.
Okay. All right, well, that's okay.
Is
Yeah,
Karen still on the line?
Yes, she is. So she needs.
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah,
There-
we got both of them who have their hands raised.
There is no homeowners association.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
And the dock that's floating out in the water attaches to the little pier that you see in the picture. That's like, it's just a detachable unit. It's normally in the winter, that's all one unit.
This is Deshaun Mission.
Okay, so to answer your question, Paul, no, there is no homeowners association associated with this.
Okay,
pond.
thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Amongst the commission, any further discussion? So I think what I'm saying is that the commission is not willing to entertain the variance. And if that's the case, then I think we just need to call a vote and make it up or down. Unless I'm
If I
missing
may-
the mark there.
If I may, I have 3 comments that said no. That leaves 4 remaining.
Well, I'm waiting to hear from the other 4, but
Yeah, I wouldn't be in favor of the variance.
okay. Who do we have left? Me, Pat, and Rick, I think, right?
Yes.
Well, I mean, if that's the case, we're already at 4, so I guess it doesn't matter what we have to say on the matter at that point. Yeah, I don't see the validity in continuing this, because it seems to me as though there's already 4 people saying they're not going to vote for it. So given that the condition, I guess we should just go ahead and call the vote.
Well, if what I would suggest, can we? I mean, we would rather withdraw, but
Yeah, I was going to say you can withdraw without prejudice as well.
yeah, but I think, could you give us the opportunity just to look into this a little further? If we continue it if we want to continue it, I would like the opportunity to talk to the neighbor and just see if that helps any of the board members. I think I agree with the philosophy that if they looked at the plan online and saw the way it was, and then all of a sudden found out that somebody approved it closer, they might not like it. So I think I do think we should have try to have the opportunity to talk to them if we can get a hold of them, and that might help the board members have a better feeling, perhaps.
Okay, I mean, I don't have an issue with that. I mean, if the rest of the board is willing to entertain that, I will ask that we continue this to August 6th. Is there any objection to that?
No.
All right, so
No, but
No,
we're not guaranteeing we're going to say yes.
yeah,
I
just, I
know,
mean, Mark understands that, I think, but
The onus is on me to give you perhaps some new information that might help you.
okay.
And if
All
I
right.
can't, then we understand that.
All right, so then if that's the case, then could I get a motion to continue to August 6th?
I make a motion that we
moved.
continue.
All right, Ellie and
Second.
David, would you second?
Sure, second.
Tom.
All right, thank you. Kelly, could you call the roll?
All right, can I just confirm who seconded that?
Ellie
I did.
moved it, David seconded.
Thank you. Bishop,
Aye.
Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Oops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Aye.
Motion to continue to August 6th carries unanimously.
All
Thank you
right,
very much.
thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Next order of business is another notice of intent for William and Jeanette Hasapitas, 24 Scallop Road, Yarmouth, Massachusetts. Proposed modification to an existing licensed dock within Salt Pond. And I think Lynn Hamlin is here for that.
Yes, Lynn Hamlin, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Good. I'm going to try to be quick. This application is to modify an existing licensed pier. I hope everybody looked through their packets that I submitted. This pier enjoys an amnesty license, one of the few ones that are out there that has a 99-year term. It can be documented to have existed at least from 1971. In 1978, the then commission issued an approval to do routine maintenance on the structure. There's a letter from Brad Hall in 1998 that confirmed that he believed that it qualified as an amnesty license. And I have spoken with and conferred with David Hill. So what happened was Mr. Hasapitas had bought the property in 2018, and he thought he was within his permit ability to rebuild the structure. And to his credit, he rebuilt it exactly to the specifications as it was licensed. I mean, all the parts can be built off site and brought in. But it was bright and shiny and came to Kelly's attention, and she likes to take up these kinds of opportunities to upgrade these structures as much as possible to try to undo some of the environmental impacts without compromising the life or the term of the license. So I conferred with the homeowner, and he was happy to oblige. And the offending parts of this pier were the first 3 floats, which sit on the marsh. So what we did was a redesign, which removes those 3 floats, extends the fixed section so it's elevated above the marsh. What we did is we reversed the end 2 floats, because the end float is 6 feet wide, while the one before it's only 4 feet wide. And with the ramp, we wanted to have a little wider surface for stability. And also Dan Odular felt the need to add 1 more 2-inch pipe. So I ran this by Dave Hill, and he said as long as we stayed within the existing footprint, he could do this under a minor plan modification without compromising the 99-year term of the license. Waterways has approved it, saying it was a market improvement. Well, they said it was improvement. I might have just added market. And I'm going to keep it short and let you ask me questions.
All right, thanks, Lynn. Commissioners, questions?
Well, it is a marked improvement. It's been sitting on that marsh for years and years and years. So if we can get it up and out of that, that would be great.
All right, thank you, Ellie. Anybody else?
I agree with Ellie's comments, Rick.
Okay, thanks, Rick. And further conversation? All right, Kelly?
So we are waiting on a file number for this application from DEP. Lynn, I assume you haven't received one either.
No, while I was waiting for my turn, I looked online and they haven't issued it yet.
Okay, and we also haven't received back a DMF comment letter for this yet. I'm assuming they're going to have the same comments with regard to the height of the dock. So, but assuming you'll want to wait to receive their comments. The only other comment that I have, I understand this is a great improvement over the existing conditions. But again, it's very, very shallow water. So there is, again, that opportunity to maybe extend the pier out a little further and reduce the float, because there's 2 floats there. Maybe they could just have 1 float and have the pier go out a little further to improve the conditions even more. Though I appreciate that it is a you know, an existing dock, and they are improving the conditions there.
Okay, yeah, I think it's an overall big improvement. So we're looking basically at just continuing this for waiting for DMF and DEP number.
That's
Is that
right.
right?
Mhm.
Okay. Is there anybody in the, I'm sorry, anybody else on the commission have any further conversations on this?
Nope.
Anybody in the audience who has any questions or comments on this project? Raise your.
$399.99.
Sorry.
I don't see any raised hands in the audience.
That's cheap.
I was gonna say, it sounds like a cheap price to me.
No, it's spam, spammy, spam.
All right, so then if there's no further discussion amongst the commission, can I get a motion to continue to, we'll just try August 6th, where we are waiting for a DMF comment and the assignment of a DEP number.
So moved.
Thank you, Ellie. Is there a second?
Second.
Is that Paul?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Kelly, would you call the roll, please?
Bishop,
Aye.
Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Oops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Aye.
Motion to continue to August 6th carries unanimously.
All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Next order of business is a notice of intent for John Muscatel, 44 Grandview Drive, Yarmouth, Massachusetts, to propose changes to an existing pier and float facility on Bass River. And this is Bob Perry.
Bob Perry, I'll just allow him to speak. So you should be able to unmute yourself now. You're all set.
Are we good?
Yep, you're good, Bob, go ahead.
Hi there. Hi there, and thank you for having us. Bob Perry for the record. I've been working with the Muscatels for a while. They had an initial proposal here at 44 Grandview Drive. They were initially, I think a couple of years ago, before the Waterways Committee and then before you for an effort to get their 24/8 float out into the deepest water possible. And I think the choice at that time, just to give you a little history, was that the pier was proposed to extend the maximum distance from shore, but at that distance, only 2 plus very little extra feet of water was available at the low tide. The pier that we're looking at was licensed in the mid-90s. There was, according to the license plan, considerably greater amount of water here. And if you've been to this location, you know that you can't walk in it. It's like a fine sludge. You can't even hardly survey the bottom because your rod is barely able to find anything in terms of false bottom. The latest proposal here, after the 80-foot length that was achieving enough water to be pretty good for making the best of a bad situation. This proposal is now intended to maintain a certain situation that the applicant established and then had enforcement action taken. What we have effectively was the applicant moving his licensed 24/8 float seaward some amount and then getting to that float by a floating dock system that was on the bottom in certain locations and at certain tides. This proposal removes the float access to that 24/8 float, and it replaces it with a pile supported pier that is effectively a replacement of the roughly 24-foot segment. Actually, it was looks to me when I look at what we have is a existing pier that was approximately 8 to 10 feet long. We have a 16-foot extension for a total length of 24 feet of pile supported pier. From there, your typical ramp comes down to the float. By looking at the profile, you can see navigable water is minimal. That facility has been used, and in far less water. It's a licensed structure, although the amount of sediment that apparently has come ashore due to the speed zone turning up the bottom and the southwest winds have really shoaled this area in. The other portion of this proposal is the elimination of a not permitted jet ski float and the attachment by way of the pilings and a sturdy frame segment of a store-bought, pre-manufactured jet ski lift. And it's shown that not really, we didn't show the apparatus. We have information on it that's from the manufacturer, but it would basically be bolted to the side of the dock. The owner would have to use the tide to use the facility. You can't launch the jet ski in the mud. So without going on, I just wanted to let you know we did have a Waterways Committee meeting. I don't believe we had a unanimous vote. I think we had, I don't recall, Kelly may have the letter. It was, I think, 2-2 or 2 abstentions and 2 for it. Then to round this whole discussion off, we also checked for file number. We do not have one. We have not yet heard from DMF as well. So I'm ready to take questions if you have any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Commission, any questions from the commissioners?
Me again, Ellie.
All right, Ellie.
It is an improvement over what's there, and they're removing the existing float. I do have, I would like to see that jet ski. You say it's bolted to the pilings. Is it going to be lifted up and down, or as you said, is it going to be permanent and it's stuck to wherever the tide is?
It's going to live in a fixed position, bolted to the stringer, and a set of timbers that are bolted on down low on that 8-foot span.
So it'll be sort of like a cradle at mid tide or high tide.
Think of it as a forklift. It's a mini forklift.
Okay. The length overall, the existing piers do seem to go out. Well, I guess you got that line there, and I know it's a difficult area for that dock. And you don't have much water. Didn't we discuss float stops on that at the waterways? I believe we did.
We did. In my thinking, that they'd probably be mounted to the float. I believe that they're going to settle right into that sludge. We might be able to work something out that would cradle the float that's attached to the pilings. I did not go down the road of float stops because I think that can be managed. We wanted to get somewhere with the idea. Again, when we were here before, we were getting out the 80 feet, and you can see that if you do that, you can get a far better navigable water condition than what we have here. This was a second effort. I know that we don't want to revisit too many old wounds, but to us, the first proposal seemed reasonable because we could get even better water, and the applicant was willing to build the structure. But now what we've tried to do is to hold to the circumstances that are, although not permitted, status quo, and to remove the worst offending float segments. So that's where we are.
Thank you, Bob.
All right, thank you, Bob. Thank you, Ellie. Anybody else in the commission have any comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman, Bishop.
Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, Bob, I think that you've done a nice job with the proposed structure. My only concern is that I feel like that the personal watercraft arrangement needs to be a power lift arrangement to get it out of the water.
Well, it is. It is, Rick. I'm quite sure it is. I'd have to go back through the file and look at the nomenclature, but it's a power lift.
Okay, you didn't suggest that before, so that's good. Okay, that's all I have.
Yeah, I think I'll be honest with you. I don't have a lot of familiarity with them, and I presume that if you're going to take your 600-pound jet ski and raise it, and you might not have got that, but it's always been that, and I may not have made it clear, but hopefully somewhere in my application I wrote jet ski lift, but I may not have, and we can't lift it by hand. So,
thank you.
You bet.
All right, thanks, Rick. Anybody else in the commission? All right, Kelly, any comments?
Okay, so we don't have a file number for the project. We do have the waterways comments, and I'm not sure this makes sense, but it says that they voted 4-3 to support the project as presented with 1 abstention. I'm just not sure they have 8 people on their committee, but it was a split vote either way in terms of support for the project. So this is definitely an improvement over the existing conditions. I would suggest that my preference would be to extend the pier out further, as maybe not to the extent as was previously proposed, but I think that would be beneficial in terms of getting greater depth of water. The initial proposal that was denied proposed a float square footage of 363 square feet, which I think may have been one of the reasons it was denied. So with a reduced float size, then maybe an extended pier is a more palatable option. But certainly as it is also an improvement over the existing conditions. I would ask that we receive the spec for the jet ski lift, just so we have that information. It's referenced in the material, but we don't actually have that from the manufacturer. So if we could get that information, it might make it a bit clearer for the commission as to what it looks like. And there is a reference to deck planks being 1/2 inch, but they should be 3/4 inch spacing per the regulations. And that is all I have. Oh, and we did need DMF comments. I'm sorry, we haven't received those yet.
So how far would you recommend going out at extending the pier?
Well, I guess part of it would depend on navigation. There's quite a bit of space there, I think, but if it extended no further than the docks either side, then I think it would be beneficial to try and get a bit more depth of water.
Yeah, I was, that's what I looked at, was comparing the dock to the north, it's level with, but the dock to the south, it's just on the inside corner. So, I mean, it could come out a little to make it there, but
Yeah,
that's not going to give them much.
Difference to the depth of water. I know it seems like it's pretty flat.
Well, let me add that the pier to our east is quite far away. It's 77 feet. It exceeds your minimum by a couple of feet. We're a little bit closer to the float on our west. I was going to suggest if there's interest in doing that, I know the applicant would be eager to do it, because it may make sense to do a 2-bent extension, which would be a 24-foot extension that would not bring it out any farther than the pier to the west. And it would be far under your 80-foot maximum. I think it would be under the 80-foot maximum by about 12 feet. But it doesn't seem to interfere with the navigation to the project or the facility to the east. But we would look at that, and then my applicant, my client, would entertain a redesign. I don't know if we'd have to go back to waterways or not.
What were the concerns at waterways, Ellie? Was it the depth of water, or? navigate?
Yeah, it was the depth of water and the float, the stops not being viable in that area because it was very mucky.
Okay, so you assume that by moving it to slightly deeper water, that they would be supportive of that.
Any improvement would be good, and I'm looking at this in the one on the float I keep calling it south because I just thinking Bass River goes north and south, but it doesn't all through it. But the one to the left, if you bring it out to the corner of the outside corner of the existing float, that may give them a couple of extra feet. Doesn't give them much in water, but if we can angle that float a little to come in line with that, that might help.
I think we'll pick up 1.5 feet of water by doing that,
Yeah.
based on information.
Well, that's more than what they have now, and it doesn't go out to the 80 feet. So, and I don't foresee that would have to really be looked at by the waterways. That Carl could probably just approve that as is because it's just a minor change.
It works for me. The trouble with this area is once you get out beyond 80 feet, it's flat, and yet you've got almost 3 feet of water for the general condition when you're out there. And then of course you get out to where the boats are going, it's quite a bit deeper. So I think we should explore that. And I would, of course, I think DMF gets a revised plan. And we would explore that with the applicant. I think it would be great.
Yeah. Well, I'm very, very familiar with that area because at dead low tide, when I go through there with my boat, it squats when I speed. So I can't do it. I bounce off the bottom. So I know how low it gets in there.
Yeah.
It's a tough place for it.
I understand. It's changed over the years. I've actually had a request for some dredging, not here, but elsewhere. I'm not sure I'll get involved in it, but it's a tough spot. I agree with you, but this applicant is trying to make the best of a bad situation, and he's had a long established facility that is becoming navigably difficult. So we could move on with a revision and bring it back to you.
Sounds good. And by that point, we'll have the, sorry, Ed, I wasn't sure whether we lost you there.
Yeah, no, I'm here. Yeah, I mean, we'll have to continue it to get,
Oh, yeah.
obviously we will be sending it back to DMF, right?
Yes.
So I don't know what kind of time frame should we be looking at there?
Well, I think that I would just email it to Eileen Feeney and just give her a heads up that there's a plan revision afoot, and 2 weeks is enough for us. But if that's not something they can handle, then we'll let you know, and we'll try to get back to you within a week.
All right. I mean, if that sounds good to me, if everyone on the commission is fine with that.
One other point, Ed.
Yeah.
If you need more time, or you think you need more time, the applicant needs to relicense this. He's not building it this summer. And if it's helpful to you and to DMF, just so we don't waste a lot of time, we could continue a month.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, in the light that we haven't even received the first round of comments from DMF, maybe it might be better to just say we'll do it in a month, and then
let's do it
at that point. If that's all right, Bob.
That's fine.
Okay. All right. So that's what we'll aim for then. Let me run quickly over to the attendees, public. Is anybody in the public that has a comment or concern, question about this?
I don't see any hands raised at this point.
Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. Any further discussion among the commission? I'm not seeing any hands or objections. Everybody good then with a month, to extend a month?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at
August 20th.
the 20th. Okay, so August 20th. Do I have a motion to continue to August 20th?
So moved, Ellie.
Thank you, Ellie. Is there a second?
Tom.
Tom, thank you. Kelly, you want to call the roll?
Yep.
Aye.
Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Oops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Aye.
Motion to continue to August 20th carries unanimously.
Nice to see you all. Thank you. And
Okay, Bob, thank you.
good night to you.
All right, have a good one.
Thank you.
Next order of business is our final notice of intent for the evening. Francesco Melandri, 35 at Dora's Lane, Yarmouth, Massachusetts, restoration work on a coastal beach, coastal bank, land under a salt pond, and associated buffer zone to satisfy an enforcement order. And request also includes beach nourishment. And I think this is this Ben with her, is it?
I'm not sure. Oh, here we go. We have someone with their hand raised.
Who was that? Matt Farrell?
No, I've unmuted a telephone line who had their hand raised. I don't know if that's someone who's going to be presenting, or could you identify yourself?
I'm sorry, that's Jen Crawford. I am going to be presenting, but I believe that Matt Farrell is going to start.
Okay,
Okay.
I unmute him as well. Okay, I think I've unmuted Matt as well, so he should be able to speak. Maybe. I don't know if he's on the online or on the phone. I can see a place with his name, but it doesn't look like he has audio.
Can we ask who is 612 what 612-756-0942?
I think that's Jen, is it?
That's Jen?
Yep, correct.
Okay. All right. So you've got a you must have like an audio and a video. Okay.
And then I've unmuted Matt, but he doesn't have any audio symbol next to him, so I don't know whether he.
Oh, he's got a microphone now.
Microphone now. And then Brian Wall, who I think is their attorney, also has his hand raised, so I'll unmute him as well. So I have 3 people unmuted.
Okay, so Matt is going to do is Matt there? Can he?
We can't hear him.
Jen, how do you feel like about doing the entire presentation?
I will do my best. You guys lucked out because the baby is sleeping, so you're not going to have that in the background. Well, at least hopefully. Yeah, if Matt can't get his audio working, I'm happy to start since I have the bulk of the information for you anyway.
Okay, Matt's got his hand raised, but I think we're having audio issues on his end.
Okay, if you'd like me to just have a go, I'm happy to do that.
All right, go ahead, Jen. We'll start off. If we have to come back, we can circle back to Matt afterwards. Hopefully, he'll have it resolved by then.
Okay, that sounds good. I know Matt was going to kind of run over the existing conditions plan and the resource areas. If you would like me to do that, I can. Otherwise, I will just jump into the bulk of the presentation. Maybe I'll just do that, and then if Matt gets on, he can go over that. All right. So I appreciate you guys reading the lengthy narrative that I gave you, but considering the history with the property and all of the different items with the application, I thought it best to try and provide as thorough of a narrative as possible for you. Really, the property has been in the Nobili Melandri family for around 50 years. So in the course of that, basically half century, the property and its use has evolved and it's been added to, it's been cared for by various family members throughout the years, as often happens with these types of properties. So with that being said, we hope that the commission will view this application as a way for the property to really be brought up to date, so to speak, so that both the current owner and the commission can utilize this filing to have accurate documentation for the property, and everybody will be on the same page for any activities that may be approved on the property. So, to that end, the plans and the narrative not only addresses the items that were listed in the enforcement order, but also includes activities that the owner was looking forward to gaining permission for anyway, like further stabilization of the coastal bank with native vegetation and some of those additional items that you see in the application. So what I'm planning to do is just to, as briefly as possible, just run through the different items in the application, and then let you guys ask whatever questions you need to ask. So I'll start with addressing the items that were in the enforcement order that was issued, and how we are hoping to address those items, and then move on to some of the additional things that we included to give you a thorough filing. So the first thing was disturbance on the coastal bank. And last fall, as you all know, we had a couple large storm events, and this property lost a lot of trees during those storm events. So there was some that came down on the coastal bank, mostly on the eastern side, and the landscaper on the property was trying to just clean up some of the debris, and the existing path that goes around the east side of the house and down to the coastal bank, they were utilizing that to try and get some of that down debris out of there. Because I don't think that area was ever really heavily vegetated with anything anyways, those soils got disturbed in the course of doing that. Since that time, much of the vegetation has regrown in that area, some good, some bad. But either way, what we're proposing to do is to manage any invasive species or annual weed species in that area on the path and down the bank, and then to overseed any areas which are not vegetated with a native seed mix, and on the actual bank part itself, where we have that slope, to cover that area with erosion control blankets in order to stabilize any of those soils until that seed mix can really come in and do the work for that. The next item is the disturbance to the salt marsh. There was a period of time for about 20 years where the property was really not maintained due to, more elderly family members really being the only ones that were at the property during that time period. And I think that during that time, Phragmites either was established on the east side of the property or became established on the east side of the property, and it moved all the way across the beach to the west side. Once the property became cared for again, the family members had the intent, I believe, of eliminating the Phragmites by digging the roots out, as they knew that just cutting it doesn't work. Obviously, they should have gotten a permit to do anything there, but it was something that had, been done throughout the years by various family members to keep the beach clean and to use the area. So the intent was to get rid of the Phragmites, but as you all know, the Phragmites and salt marsh occupy basically the same intertidal zone, and so salt marsh was disturbed as well. To that end, I did do some site investigations, some field work, to really get a better handle on what the existing conditions of the site are. And what I was able to identify was areas where there are still peat deposits remaining on site. I documented all of that a little bit more thoroughly for you in the narrative. But basically, my investigations are represented in there and on the plan. The areas also do show remnants of Phragmites roots. And so that's why I believe that, I do believe that the intent was to eliminate Phragmites. The roots of Phragmites are very visible and very different looking than that of salt marsh, and so those are clearly there. Those conditions, those site conditions that I was investigating and that I was trying to gain more information for, also dictated the methodology for restoring the salt marsh in that area. And I outlined two slightly different ways, essentially, that we're proposing to restore salt marsh. So I'll be happy at the end to answer questions about those if you have them. In regard to the bulkhead, the coastal engineering structure that's on the property, historically that was comprised of railroad ties. Obviously those don't last forever. So as they decayed and they started to fail, they were replaced with the current structure. So for that item in particular, we respectfully request the ability to maintain it. It is adjoining to the neighboring property to the west. They have the exact same structure there. Not that that's a reason, but I'm just saying that that structure continues along this section of shoreline. Along with the proposal, we also include a provision to provide some annual beach nourishment to maintain the beach elevations at the approximate same elevations where they meet those adjacent property lines, which are slightly higher than like the middle section of the property. That activity would also be, I believe, beneficial for the salt marsh restoration as well. And again, I detailed that a little bit more clearly in the narrative. The enforcement order also listed retaining walls on a coastal bank. There were 2 landscape timber walls that were installed toward the top of the coastal bank, and they're shown on our plan. They were installed in an area that had been subject to some erosion from stormwater and upland areas during that time period when the property really wasn't maintained by anybody. It was kind of let go, for lack of a better term. Those 2 retaining walls do appear to have solved the erosion issues, but the area is not vegetated with native species. It's mostly annual weed species that are growing in and around that area. So the proposal does include to revegetate that area with native shrubs and grasses to provide some better wildlife forage and cover, as well as ground covers to stabilize soils in that area. The enforcement order also referred to debris on the coastal bank, which we believe is the area on the very east of the property, towards the bottom of the coastal bank, where Phragmites stalks that were cut and pulled through the years, they were piled in that area along the bank. And so along with that debris, Phragmites has also started to grow in the bank of that area. So we're proposing to remove the debris, manage any of the Phragmites that are on the property, including in that area, through a clip and drip method, and then to seed and stabilize that area with native vegetation. So I think that would definitely be much more beneficial than what's currently there from an ecological standpoint. So the other items that we included to try and give you a very thorough and forward-looking application includes a list of existing features that have been added to the property over the years or were there historically pre-Wetlands Protection Act. And so that list is pretty clear, and all of those items are shown on the plan. The other things that we included were the ability to finish cleaning up the storm debris. I included a picture at the end of the narrative there. There are still a lot of down debris that was not touched after Kelly had made a visit to the property. No work had been done, and so we'd like permission to just finish cleaning that up, so to speak. We included the provision, I mentioned this previous, to manage the Phragmites reed throughout the entire property through a clip and drip herbicide application to the cut stem rather than through any sort of root disturbance to manage that species. There's also a vista window that is on the property that has been maintained through the years by simply just pruning. So rather than ask for continuous pruning of vegetation to maintain that, what we would like to do is to remove any of the seedling or sapling trees that are being pruned in that area. All large canopy trees, there's no work proposed to those, and there's actually a couple that are in that vista, 1 or 2 that are in that vista itself. I'm just talking about anything that's been previously pruned, the very small ones. We would like permission to remove those and then to replace that vista area with maritime shrubland species that can grow to their full mature size without ever needing to be pruned. The area would also be seeded with a native seed mix and blanketed with erosion control blankets to hold everything in place until the ground cover species establish themselves. There really aren't any ground cover species growing in that area currently. So I think between the addition of that and the addition of native species which are not currently existing on site, I think to improve that that plant diversity would also definitely enhance the wildlife habitat value there. The last thing with the application is what I termed a hillside management. I didn't really know what else to include or to term it as, but it's really out near the 100-foot buffer line. It's where in the area where the septic was upgraded a number of years ago. It's a hillside that's for the most part full of invasive species and annual weed species. So we would like permission to be able to manage those and to establish native ground covers there instead. Okay, I think that very briefly runs through this lengthy application. I don't know if Matt's audio is fixed, but I'm happy to turn it over to somebody else or to you to ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer them.
All right, thanks, Jen. Is Matt, are you with us now, or? Matt?
I think the problem persists.
I don't know who that is. All right. So let's go to some questions first. If we come back to, we'll try and get Matt again, or we'll ask Jen. So, commissioners, questions.
Yes, David, I have a question.
All right, David.
You at one point you came in and out. I don't know if that was me or you of a speaker, but you mentioned clip drip herbicides. Is that what you said?
Yes, as a method to manage invasive species as well as the Phragmites, which are an invasive species. But yes, that's correct.
Could you explain that just for me?
Yes, of course. In terms of Phragmites management, what we try very hard not to do is to disturb any soils when we manage Phragmites. So the method that we typically use is to clip and drip or to bundle cut and drip the ends of the cut stem. We do this at approximately, waist to chest height because we're trying to treat above any, we're not flush cutting it down to the ground the way we would like a woody shrub or a vine species that's growing in an upland. We use aquatic approved herbicides, and basically the stem is just cut and herbicide is applied to the cut stem. So it's not a broad foliar application. It's very, very targeted, and it uses a much smaller volume of herbicide, and it's very, very effective. And not only that, once roots of that particular plant are disturbed, sometimes that can result in much smaller pieces coming back in a more dense manner than with a lot of baby Phragmites versus being able to treat larger, more mature plants that take up that herbicide very quickly. Let's see. So the same premise we use as a clip and drip method to treat other invasive species in the upland, but typically in those types of conditions, the whatever we're treating, albeit bittersweet, shrub honeysuckle, vine honeysuckle, whatever it might be, are flush cut closer to the ground, and that cut stem is then basically painted with an herbicide. And for those same reasons, it's very effective. It's very targeted and selective, and it uses a very low volume of herbicide in comparison to foliar applications. Did that answer everything you wanted to know more?
Yes, thank you. And more.
Okay, anybody else?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Rick.
I certainly appreciate this proposal by Crawford Land Management. We've had good success with them in the past, but I must share with the commission that I happened to be there the day that Conservation Administrator Grant was called down by a neighbor. And I can tell you, and I think everyone needs to understand this, and I use the words egregious very carefully. There was evidence of skid steer work right to the edge of the water. This is not, and they opened up that access path. And I say, the skid steer went right to the water and some left and right. And it is my opinion that it's a very easy claim for people to make. They're cleaning up storm damage, but it didn't appear to me personally when I was there that day. So I'm very, very concerned about this project, but I respect and I'm happy to see that they're taking the violation notice seriously and are proposing a major project. But that was my experience here that day, and it was very disappointing. That's all I have.
Sorry, just to let you know that I have unmuted the phone number ending 601 because I think I recognized it as Matt's phone number. I think he's dialed in as well as online. So if you want to try and speak now, you might be able to.
Yes, hello, this is Matt Farrell. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
You can?
Yes.
Well, I was going to start out and just kind of describe we're the land surveyors and engineers that are responsible for completing the existing condition survey on the property. I was just going to kind of describe the existing condition plan, you know, and the resources in which we're working. I don't know if all that is mute at this point. I certainly would be more than happy to answer any questions anyone has about the existing condition survey we completed.
All right. So first of all, does anybody have any more questions on the restoration side of it?
Well, this is Ellie, and
Okay.
I have to agree with Rick on this. It's getting to the stage of the game where it's easier to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission and then redo. Would we, if they came before us with this whole massive plan before any of this violation ever happened, would we overall approve all this work that was being done?
Well, I mean,
it's if they came before us with this plan,
it would be a significant, it would be you're right. It would be a significant order of conditions in order to
yeah. So they did a violation. They're trying to rectify it, and they're asking for forgiveness and getting all this stuff. It's a great plan right now, but the overall question is, if they came before us with just this plan, with an NOI without the violation, would we approve this? That's a question we need to ask ourselves, I think.
All right, thank you, Ellie. Any further discussion on that point? All right. Thanks again, Ellie. Are there other questions on the restoration side? All right. Is there any questions on the existing?
Hand up. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Who was that? Was that Kelly?
Paul has his hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry, Paul. I can't see everybody here. So, yeah. Paul, go ahead.
No, I'm just looking forward to Kelly's comments on this project. It is quite extensive and complicated, and it would be very helpful to hear her comments. I know you're going there. Thank you.
Kelly, if you don't mind, I'm gonna put you last.
Me?
Yeah, you. Is there any questions from the commissioners on existing conditions? All right. Well, let's go over to Kelly then.
Okay, so I think by and large the restoration work looks very good as proposed. There's a good mix of native species proposed and a good lot of stabilization, which will improve the conditions out there. I mean, there's, you know, a couple of things like the pathway that was extended down to the water under this violation had originally been cut apparently back in about 2013 without permitting. So that's kind of remains. I think it's being revegetated, but in terms of its topography, it's going to remain as it was from when it was cut back then. I don't have a huge problem with that as long as that area is maintained as a vegetated area. There was some comment about an access way for beach nourishment, which might conflict with maintaining that area as a vegetated area. So that's one thing we might have to come back to. With regard to the salt marsh restoration, I do have concerns with the extent of the proposed salt marsh restoration. The aerial photos and a previous plan when the house was reconstructed show significantly larger area of salt marsh that existed previously with a small area of coastal beach in between. So you can see it in this image. Oh, and I made them so small that I can't see the dates now. But I think that was 2012 is in this top image, and you can see the beach in the middle and then vegetation extending all the way along. And then this one was 2015, where you see a much more open area of beach. You can see this is where the new wall had been constructed, and then this kind of cut off area of vegetation at the ends. So I really think that we should be getting back to this level of salt marsh in terms of the restoration work. That's significantly more than what's on the plan. And then just in terms of the comments that came from DMF, they have recommended the salt marsh be planted at the correct elevations, which will, you know, be the case with the company used to install the salt marsh would need to obviously be qualified and experienced in that type of work. That the work should be performed from the upland side of the project site to the maximum extent possible. No construction materials or debris should be stored in the existing marsh or intertidal area. And then they commented that as the project goes through DEP and Army Corps, they would be looking for a higher ratio of restoration or mitigation for the restored area versus impacted area, looking at a minimum of 3 to 1, which again will be even larger than restoring it back to the conditions on this older plan, which was the pre-existing conditions. So I think we should certainly be looking at that. And then their last point, which I already mentioned, is that the work should be performed by contractors with past experience and demonstrated success in salt marsh restoration. So I think Crawford have that experience and qualification, so they should be named in the order of condition as the company to perform the work, or with a substitute to be approved by the commission based on their credentials. And then beach nourishment was mentioned, but we don't really have any more detailed information on how and when that would be done and the profiles. So we would need to see a proposed profile for the beach nourishment and volume. And then we would just need to include some conditions related to that as well. And then deal with the issue of access for the beach nourishment and how that will impact the restoration vegetation at the property. With regard to the CES, the wall that appeared in the 2015 image, the previous, I think I had another. So this is an image taken from our GIS, which shows the wall to this point. So it was from the previous, the abutting property onto this property. And then it was extended. You can see something along the base here. So as Jen was saying, it may have been like a landscaping wall that has been replaced with something more substantial. So under this notice of intent, issuing an order of conditions, you would be approving that CES in this location. The house at the property pre-existed, it predated the requirement for a CS. So in that respect, it's not an issue. But I guess again, as Ellie made the point, if this came to you now, would you approve it? Given there was something there previously, then maybe the answer to that would be yes. So I think that is all my comments. Oh, and we don't have a file number yet for this project.
Okay. Okay. All right, thank you, Kelly. I mean, I guess my one concern, Jen, are you and or Nick SERP certified? You have your SERP
Yes,
certification?
Yep, Nick is a certified ecological restoration practitioner.
Okay.
He has received that certification, yes.
Okay. So, I mean, I think that's the one thing. I mean, I don't have a problem with Crawford Land Management doing the work. I think this is certainly one of those cases that, and any kind of case like this, we would best be suited to condition that anybody doing the work, there has to be at least one SERP certified individual working directly on the project. So I think that's taken care of. I do agree with you, Kelly, in terms of salt marsh restoration needs a little bit beefing up, if you ask me. I understand what you're saying about the beach nourishment and the way it relates to salt marsh restoration, but I'd like to see a little bit more information on that.
More information, more specifically, like a profile, like Kelly had mentioned.
Yeah. So
okay.
just so we can see exactly what the intended outcome is.
Yep, sure, no problem.
And I think that's all I have, but I'll turn it back to the commission if anybody else has any further questions after Kelly's comments. Anybody?
This is David.
Yeah, go ahead.
I spent a good 45 minutes out there this week, and I'm just, I'll be honest with you, I'm overwhelmed by what's there and what had to be done and or what has to be done. So I need time to look at this over, maybe make a second visit.
I think we're definitely going to get a second time because we're going to have to continue it either way. But
yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I stepped on Jen there.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, I know that there are a lot of moving pieces and a lot of kind of segmented pieces to the proposal. But the overall, in terms of the restoration work, I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by what maybe to your eyes looks like a whole bunch of different things. It's a ton of work. To us, being an ecological restoration company, in all honesty, the restoration work on this property is not it's not a lot. Like, I would consider this a small to medium-sized project for our company, and so I know that it's different when you're looking at it from a different viewpoint. But so I guess I'm hoping that you will feel comfortable with the amount of work, because it's actually very, very doable, and within one season's time will look very, very different. But I do recognize that the application has a lot of different pieces to it, but the overall intent is the hope that everyone will gain, will have something on record with conservation. You guys will know what's happening there. You'll know what's there. The property owner, who has really taken over legal ownership of this property only about a year ago, will also have that same starting point, so to speak, so that everybody's on the same page. At least that's the hope. And I am more than happy to, if any commissioners want to go back out to the property and they have questions specifically, related to the restoration work, I'm more than happy to meet any of you out there to help explain it while looking at the site, if that would be helpful. I know it can be a little overwhelming sometimes.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Jen. I'm sure maybe some of us might take you up on that one. let's see, I'm sorry. Any further questions from the board? Kelly, any further comment?
I did receive a email from an abutter today who wanted their comments included in the record. So if you want me to summarize that, I can.
I was gonna say, is it a long? I mean, if you could just summarize, that would be beneficial.
Sure, it's from Pamela Lewis, who is I'm not sure what the number. She doesn't put her number, but oh, actually, it says it's from Pamela Lewis's email, but it says it's from Richard A. Smith. And it says, as a third generation year-round Cape Cod resident and the next door neighbor to 35 Outdoors Lane for 18 years, I feel qualified to comment on the proposal. Tornadoes took down a few trees in the neighborhood. Shifting of earth did. We also have much more water on our property due to shifting of earth. My concern is that for 7 years, this property has had earth moved around, trees falling down, not from storms, paths created and then called existing, rock, soil, and sand brought in, all without notice to abutters or to the town, as far as I can tell. For years now, the peace and tranquility that Dr. Nobly created and we enjoyed has been destroyed. All of this I have observed clearly. The Conservation Commission is to protect the Cape and her natural resources, and that has not happened here until November of 2019. What is to stop more destruction in the name of creating beachfront in an area that should have marsh to nourish the long existing birds, fish, and waterfowl, fish and shellfish? Is this good stewardship of the land? Respectfully submitted, Richard A. Smith.
All right, thank you, Kelly. Any further comment among the commission? Anybody in the public has any comments, concerns with this? If not, do you want 2 weeks or a month? Kelly, what do you think? Is two?
I mean, I think that on my end, it doesn't really matter. So depending on how full your agenda is. I don't know, Matt, are you still on? Do you have a preference?
No, I'm here. It sounds like, we need to provide some beach profiles for the beach nourishment. And that's really about, it.
Yep.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, I think, Rick, was that you?
No, that was Brian Wall speaking up.
Oh, sorry. Oh, Brian, okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, I've been doing a lot of these Zoom hearings and everyone's a little bit different town by town. I had my hand raised. I didn't want to be impolite.
I'm sorry, I was getting to you next.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry for piping up. I have 3 or 4 very brief comments, if I may. I mean,
okay, sure.
Without the file number and with the request for further information, there's going to be a continuance. But I just wanted to kind of leave. I didn't want to leave this hearing with not addressing a couple of comments regarding the scope of violations. I think it's important to remember that this family has been on this property for more than 50 years. It in fact goes back to 1966. And so I know that the current owner, Francesco Millardi, would take issue with some of the comments that were made about recent access paths being made or extensions of walls. I don't want to get into a specific argument about it tonight, but I just want the commission to kind of hear us, and we would ask that you take care in distinguishing between prior disturbed areas that were done lawfully, a lot of it before the Wetlands Act even existed, and what is technically, a violation. I would also, to that point, remark that there was a substantial addition on the property permitted in 2013. And so some of the recent construction, there was a septic upgrade, an addition and improvements made to the property, we believe all with proper permits. And so some of the things that you're seeing out there are recent but permitted. Regarding the CES, I heard staff member Grant say that if there was something there before, it would make the commission's, I think, review a little bit easier. And I spoke with Mr. Millardi, and he tells me that as long as he can remember from when he was a child, there was a structure there consisting of railroad ties. And when he said railroad ties, he means the old kind of railroad ties, the 4x4 with, you know, black oil creosote. And that was taken out, and the thing that you see there now was put in at the exact same time as the neighbor to the west. They apparently replaced theirs. And so the wall that is there, I would contend, is actually a repair and replacement of a pre-existing wall that predated the Wetlands Protection Act. And then finally, again, we're going to come back with more information, but I just didn't want to leave these remarks kind of unaddressed, implying that we agree with them. With regard to the extent of salt marsh, I met on site with Jen Crawford, and she explained in detail that the figures that she came up with as for insofar as what is being proposed is based upon her corings, her borings into the earth. And she believes that where the salt marsh needs to be restored is where there's peat underneath, where the salt marsh could grow. And in juxtaposed to that, Mr. Millardi told me that, again, as far as back as his memory can go when he was a child, he says there was always a beach there. But what happened was the property, as you heard a little bit earlier, for about 20 years was in the ownership of Mr. Millardi's aunt. And she's now in her upper 80s, and the property fell into a state of disrepair. One, because she was in her senior years, or I should say was, she's still alive, but she was in her senior years while she was living there. And secondly, she didn't have the finances to take care of the property. And so what Mr. Millardi explained is that during that time, the Phragmites kind of really took over. And he also explains that being kind of on the far end of the fetch, the southwesterly winds blow sea lettuce and other debris up onto the beach. And so I would just, again, kind of ask the commission to look carefully at the facts here. And when you see an aerial photo showing a green area on the water, it doesn't necessarily mean it was salt marsh. It could have been Phragmites, it could have been blown up sea lettuce, etc. And so again, Jen Crawford spent a lot of time out there looking at the distinguishing features between Phragmite roots, which she showed to me, which look very different than salt marsh, and the flora and I think Spartina as far as salt marsh is concerned. So again, I think the overall big picture here is that Francesco Millardi is now, I think, the third generation owning the property. He's recently come into ownership. This has happened. Jen has kind of told you what our theme is. It's kind of like hit the reset button. Let's have an existing conditions plan that everyone knows accurately reflects conditions. Let's have a notice of intent in an order of conditions that governs conduct going forward. And I'm hoping that all of this can be resolved through this process.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wall. It's again, we are here to we're concentrating on the restoration aspect of it. So, I mean, everybody is allowed to is given their own opinion, allowed to state their own opinion. But what we are here to do is to look at the restoration plan that's before us, and I think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to work toward that resolution. I guess the other question I would ask then is if there's real discrepancy between the amount of salt marsh, I would also ask that Jen provide some data on for the boring data that she collected. That would be helpful as well. And then perhaps one of us or a couple of us might go out and try and take a look as well with her. And we sort of review the project as well in the field. So
sure. And I'm happy to bring a soil auger with and to show you, like, I can show you what I did. It's not complicated. It's methodical, but it's not really complicated.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to show you what I did so that you can see and understand at least what I deduced as the current existing conditions. So yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, that's fine. So unless there's any further discussion, I think we need to continue at I think we're looking for what, August 20th?
Yeah, I would say
Right.
1 month would be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do I have a motion to continue to August 20th?
So moved.
That was Rick, I think.
Yes.
Ellie second.
Ellie seconded, thank you. Kelly, could you call the roll?
Or Bishop,
Aye.
Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Groups,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern. Pat,
Aye.
thank you. Motion carries unanimously to continue to August.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you all for your time tonight.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Yes.
We will see you in a month.
Thank you, folks.
Sounds
Good
good.
night.
All right, the last order here is we have a certificate of compliance for SE 83-2080 60 Camp Street, Yarmouth, and it looks like it's straightforward, Kelly.
Relatively so, yeah. The only there's no downspouts and dry wells, but they did install drip trenches around the entire property, so I have no concerns with that. The only thing is that some areas remain unvegetated, just because it's not the time of year for lawn to be growing. So there's just sort of some sparse weed, and it's otherwise unvegetated. It's a very dense buffer of vegetation beside it, and it seems relatively stable, I guess, probably because we haven't had a lot of rainfall. But there doesn't seem to be any runoff issues, and they're planning on getting the lawn established in the fall.
Okay, so you're good with everything out that as is to issue then?
Yeah.
All right, so do I have a motion to issue the certificate of compliance for SE 83-2080 60 Camp Street?
We do have a hand raised. I don't know if you want to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Stello, are you here for this item?
Yes, I am.
All right.
I'm Tom Stello from Alpha Survey Group. Kelly has pretty much explained everything. The applicant, Kevin Barbado, is also listening in. He's having some technical difficulties.
Okay. Did you have any further comment on this?
No, I did not. That pretty much was, sums it up. It was basically about the vegetation. He will grow, come September, but right now he's trying to conserve water, and it's just the wrong time of the year.
All right. So I thank you for your comments. Again, do I have a motion to issue the certificate of compliance for SE 83-2080 60 Camp Street?
So moved, Ellie.
Thank you, Ellie. Tom seconded. All right, thank you. Kelly, you want to call the roll?
Bishop,
Aye.
Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Groups,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously to issue the certificate of compliance.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask for a short 2-minute break?
Sure. We will, let's see, it is 8:08. We will reconvene at 8:10 precisely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stello. I don't know if he's still here or not, but. Right, it seems to be 8:10. I think I see everybody back again. Kelly, do we have any staff updates?
No, I don't have any staff updates.
Okay, the only thing I would say, I just wanted to remind everybody there, I don't know if you've seen from MACC, but there are several opportunities for fundamentals units. And I think I would ask that certainly, I mean, anybody can participate in the fundamentals units, but I think it would be most beneficial to the newer board members. So I hope that you would consider participating in those webinars. They're all online. I think there's 3 of them coming up over the next, call it 3 or 4 weeks, but just to give that for informational purposes. And if you do want to do that, certainly speak to Kelly. She's got all that information, right?
I do. I just don't have approval to spend any money yet.
Yeah, just spend it anyhow. If you spend it, they will pay for it. So with anything else, then we'll move on to the last item of business. Commissioner Huggins has comments on the fee discussion. So Paul, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I think considering the hour, I'll save the comments for another time, if that's okay.
Okay, we'll table it. All right, we'll table it. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I have one quick thing.
All right, yeah, Rick.
And I know Kelly's just overwhelmed with this, but I discovered 2 very serious violations on Dinah's Pond just recently. It wasn't a dock, it was a walkway we permitted 2 or 3 years ago that we all knew there'd be a float and a ramp, and of course it was just installed this week. And then there's a directly across from this violation on Dinah's Pond, it's the first house on the right when you make the turn onto Mayflower Terrace. There's another floating dock there, so we're just getting overwhelmed with violations.
Well, that first house has a boat on that dock, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah, and the
one as you go into Mayflower Terrace is permitted though. It's just been built, right? We permitted one at the that first one. Yeah, once you get past the cranberry bog there.
Oh, I didn't know that. I don't recall ever seeing that, but that's my bad, as some people like to say. But the one across, directly across the street from 143 is definitely not permitted for a ramp and a float. I recall that very clearly.
Yeah, I've added them to the list of.
I'm sure you have, and I'm sorry to add more work to you, but that was just irritating.
Okay.
So there was a dock permitted on that first house on the right? Because I don't recall seeing that there.
The one just after where the creek is and opposite the cranberry bog, right?
Before the creek.
Oh, before the creek?
Yeah,
the one that was just developed and built that we looked at, that threw the stuff in the creek.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was meaning the other one on the other side of the creek. So I'll have to have a look at that.
No, that's it's put in with metal pipes, and there's a boat sitting on the end of it. I think it's just all floats, not a dock. So.
Okay. I will look into it.
Terrible. Thank you.
All right, anything else? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right.
Second, David.
Thank you, David. Kelly, would you call the roll?
Sure. Bernstein,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Bishop,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Wilhern,
Aye.
Durkin,
Aye.
Oops.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, we are adjourned at 8:15.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
thank you, Kelly, for all your hard work and everything that's going on right now.
No kidding.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly.
Do we know when the town hall is going to reopen, Kelly?
I heard today that they're going to be a limited opening on Tuesday from 10 till 2 and just for some of the upstairs clerk's office, I think.
Is there a chance we'll continue these Zoom meetings or go back to our traditional meetings in August or September?
I don't know. We'll have to, I'll have to see whether they're allowing meetings in the hearing room for our next meeting, but our deadline is next Thursday for posting that. So I'll have to have an answer by then. So I guess, again, it's up to you as well. Do you want to plan for a remote meeting for the next meeting, or are you comfortable coming back to town hall?
I think for me, the remote one for the next one makes sense, but it's up to everyone else.
I agree.
Well, I agree too.
I agree.
All right, so everybody's still doing remote. Tom, you're good with that?
Yeah, it's all right.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll plan for remote for the August 6th. Okay.
Okie dokie.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Good night. Good night,
Good night,
everyone.
everybody.
On to the next meeting.
Have fun.